Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. Case 1. Cody Josiah Bigsby was born on January 12, 2018, to parents Dina Abdul Karim and Corey Jamar Bigsby of Hampton, Virginia. The couple already had another son and went on to have a total of 4 children in a span of 3 years, including a set of twin boys born after Cody. Cody was a cute little boy with curly black hair and sweet brown eyes. He had big dimples when he smiled and liked Spider-Man. Cody's parents never married, and the relationship ended in 2019. A year later, Dina was going through some major health issues, so it was decided that Corey would take custody of their children. According to Dina, Corey initially did not want to take Cody, calling him a mama's boy. Still, the couple agreed to meet for a handoff halfway between Corey's residence in Hampton and Washington, D.C., where Dina was now living. On November 1st, 2020, Dina gave the children to Corey, and that was the last time she saw any of her children for the next couple of years. She said that Corey refused to tell her his home address in Hampton so that she could visit her kids. On Monday, January 31st, 2022, Corey called the police at 9 a.m. to report that 4-year-old Cody was missing. 2 Hampton officers responded to Corey's address at the Buckrow Point Townhomes on Ramlet Drive. They spoke with Corey around 9:15, and he told them that he had awoken that morning to find Cody gone. The last time he had seen his son was around 2 a.m. when he had put the little boy to bed. He said he searched the home first, and then called 911 afterwards. Police immediately issued a press release asking the public to help in locating the little boy. He was described as being about 3 feet tall, and was believed to be wearing a black bomber jacket, black sweatpants, and Spider-Man flip-flops. The FBI soon became involved in the investigation, and 50 volunteers were enlisted to help the search for little Cody. One volunteer said that she signed up because when she heard about the missing child, it reminded her of Noah Tomlin, another little boy who had gone missing in Hampton 3 years prior. Sadly, Noah was not found alive, though volunteers hoped for a better outcome for Cody. We recently covered the story of Noah Tomlin, which you can find linked in the description box below. On Tuesday, February 1st, it was reported that Cody's parents were considered persons of interest. Hampton Police Chief Mark Talbot said that evidence hadn't matched statements that they had received from Cody's father Corey about when Cody had been last seen, although he declined to say what specific evidence they had found. He said that investigators were containing their search the area around where the boy had gone missing, and that they believed he was still somewhere within the metropolitan Hampton area. Chief Talbot also confirmed that teams were searching the water in the area, but he did not say where. As the search continued into the second cold night, the Hampton police confirmed that they were searching the Hampton NASA steam plant as an element of comprehensive search Tuesday afternoon and evening. The steam plant was a facility near Wythe Creek that incinerates waste to produce energy, and it's the same facility where 2-year-old Noah Tomlin's body was eventually found in 2019. Now, when we covered that story, we noted then that the Hampton police knew to automatically begin searching landfills nearby when children go missing. Apparently, that grim assumption was still in place when Cody was reported missing. The police also used social media to try to gain clues. Hampton police tweeted a series of questions, including, "Do you know Cody, his father Corey, or his siblings? And have you seen Cody, his father Corey, or his siblings since Christmas? And do you live in Buckrow Point Apartments and have a Ring doorbell or other surveillance cameras?" Anyone who responded yes to these questions was asked to contact the FBI. During a press conference, Chief Talbot said that although Cody's father and mother were both considered persons of interest, there was still no information that made police believe Cody Bigsby was abducted. If there was evidence that the little boy had been taken by someone, that would trigger an Amber Alert. However, he also didn't think that Cody had simply just wandered off on his own. When asked if he thought that Cody was still alive, Chief Talbot said, "We will work as if he's out there waiting for us to find him." The police confirmed that Cody's father was being cooperative and still talking to investigators. A news station spoke to his sister, Tandalea Butler. When asked about Corey's statements not adding up, she said, "I know my brother loved his children. When it came to him chastising his children, he was a cream puff. The most he would do is raise his voice. He didn't put his hands on his children." She was adamant that there was no way that her brother would harm his children. She said, "Not a chance. I don't believe it for a second. They're going to have to prove it, because I know my brother. I know my brother, and I know it's not true. It is not true. On Wednesday, police held another press conference during which they confirmed that Cody's father had been at the police department willingly since Monday, and that he was a person of interest. At the time, the police declined to comment on whether there was a history of neglecting Cody's family. Cody's other siblings have been removed from the home and were safe. Meanwhile, Wavy TV 10 News had uncovered police reports from 2018 when Cody's mother had made an assault allegation against Cody's father. In the report, Dina told police that during a fight, Corey had threatened to kill her. When she defended herself by grabbing a knife, Corey bit and choked her. The charge was ultimately null prost, meaning it would not proceed in court unless further evidence comes to light. An official source told the news that the reason for doing so is because the victim, Cody's mom, refused to cooperate or appear in court multiple times. On February 3rd, it was announced that Cody's father, Corey, had been officially taken into custody on 7 counts of child neglect. The charges were related to incidents going as far back as December, but whether or not these charges were related to Cody's disappearance was not confirmed. According to the arrest report, Corey confessed to leaving the children alone for over 3 hours on December 13, 2021, so he could go by a vehicle in Norfolk. The 3 youngest children were left home alone during this transaction. The children were left without a means or ability to communicate with emergency services. There was no indication that a babysitter was watching the children, all of whom were under the age of 6. Corey also told the detective that the children were too much of a burden to take out with him when he leaves his home. A similar incident happened on January 25th when he left the children alone for 2 hours while he visited several locations, as this was just a few days before Cody was reported missing. Corey's attorney, Jeff Ambrose, made sure to stress that these charges were not connected to the disappearance of 4-year-old Cody. Attorney Ambrose also said that Corey has not been at the police department for the past 4 days voluntarily, and that he had been denied an attorney when he first asked for one on Monday. Chief Talbot was asked about this at a press conference and responded that Corey was a capable man who had every opportunity to ask for an attorney. He did not make such a request. If he did make that request, we would have honored it. He went on to say, Mr. Bigsby is a 43-year-old man who's had a full career in the Army. He seems to be quite intelligent, he seems to be quite capable, and part of that capability seems to be understanding his rights. At no time did he request to see an attorney. Had he made such a request, we would have honored that request. Chief Talbot did say that Corey's arrest would allow the investigation to get more intense, and that the FBI provided his team with an extensive amount of forensic data. He stressed that Corey's arrest was not the conclusion in the search for Cody. However, he also said each day it becomes harder and harder to believe that Cody Bigsby is alive and well. On February 5th, nearly a week after Cody went missing, volunteers gathered again to continue the search. On that cold Saturday morning, community members searched a wooded area near Cody's home. They hiked through thorns and mud, some armed with machetes to help cut through the dense brush. A couple of people used drones while others searched bodies of water in an abandoned storage unit. The volunteers also planned to search again the following morning, ahead of a candlelit vigil planned for that Sunday night. However, their searches proved to be in vain. At the vigil, dozens of people met at the soccer fields near where Cody lived. They lit candles, held balloons, sang, and prayed for Cody's safe return. On February 8th, Corey was denied bond, a decision that his attorney planned to appeal. Meanwhile, a huge sign was placed near the apartment complex where Cody lived, placed there by a neighbor. In large, colorful letters, it read, "Cody, come home." The neighbor who placed the sign said it's hard to explain to her own children what happened to Cody. So she hoped that the sign would bring a positive light to all the children who live here. On February 12th, a boy's blue jacket was found in a field behind the apartment where Cody lived. Police, along with a forensics unit, responded to the location and retrieved the jacket. Tire tracks were also found in the field next to where the jacket was found. Although the outcome for Cody did not seem hopeful, the community continued to show support and love for the missing little boy. A sparkly box decorated for Valentine's Day was placed along a fence at a nearby soccer field, and well-wishers were encouraged to leave a Valentine's card for Cody. By Valentine's Day, the fence was lined with balloons, flowers, and other remembrances for Cody. A Facebook group dedicated to Cody gained tens of thousands of members, including people from all over the world who were eager to find out any news about Cody's disappearance. Cody's mother, Dina, released a statement to the news which read, "At this present time, I do not wish to take part in any telephone, television, or social media interviews. My reluctance is based on the upcoming trial, and the questions asked are questions that will be addressed in court. In addition, I've been advised by legal counsel not to address the public. However, I would like to speak to the support of the community. I sincerely appreciate all the volunteers, rescue workers, police, FBI, news reporters, the community at large, family, friends, and everyone who's showing love and support for Cody. It truly warms my heart. I am praying for the safe return of my baby boy Cody. I hope the public and the community understand and respect my position during this tragic time." A non-profit search and rescue volunteer team called Water Team Incorporated searched the area where Corey used to live in Norfolk, Virginia. The volunteer team had received calls from neighbors living there pointing them to the area. Members scoured the area, but again, there were no new clues found to indicate what happened to little Cody. Later in February, Hampton Police Chief Talbot held a press conference where he admitted that detectives who initially interviewed Corey had mishandled the investigation. This admission came just days after Chief Talbot had insisted that Corey had not asked for an attorney. As it turns out, Corey had come to the police station after initially reporting his son missing, and at 10 p.m. that night, investigators gave him a lie detector test that went on for hours. Around 4 a.m., Corey and a police detective got into a shouting match over one of the results, and during that exchange, Corey indicated twice that he wanted legal counsel. However, the interview continued and Corey ultimately stayed at the police station for another 2.5 days without an attorney. Once Chief Talbot was made aware of the issues with the interview, he immediately launched a full audit of nearly 100 hours of recorded interactions between police and Corey. That audit showed that investigators had read Corey the Miranda warning at least twice, first when he was initially questioned and again before a federal agency administered the polygraph test. He waived those rights until he requested an attorney for the first time around 4:13 a.m. on February 1st. Talbot said that his assessment was that Corey's desire for legal counsel should have been honored, and they weren't. However, the police declined to say specifically how Corey made his request or which exact words were used. Eventually, the lead detective was placed on administrative leave, but police have said that there were no issues with statements that Corey made before he asked for a lawyer. Chief Talbot did not think the current charges against Corey would be affected by this error. In July, it was announced that Corey had been indicted on 30 counts by a grand jury. These charges included 15 charges of child neglect for leaving his children home alone. There were also 4 more charges of alleged CA, and 2 additional child neglect charges in connection to those CA charges. 2 misdemeanor charges were also added for failure to secure medical attention for an injured child. Court documents from Hampton Circuit Court showed that Corey had left 1 or more of his young children home alone on 7 different occasions. They also stated that the children were left alone long enough for it to be considered a reckless disregard for human life. Documents also showed that he neglected to care for at least one of his 4 children on December 13th through the 15th, again on December 28th, on January 11th and 25th, and once more on February 1st, the day after Cody was reported missing. The court also alleged that Corey committed an act against a child that was so gross, wanton, and culpable as to show a reckless disregard for human life. Charges from February 1st also included 2 misdemeanor charges for failure to secure medical attention for an injured or battered child. Corey had been denied bond for the 5th time, and his case was going to go to trial. With the new charges, he could face up to 162 years in prison. However, as before, none of these charges were directly related to the disappearance of his son Cody. In July, Cody's extended family spoke publicly for the first time, both to offer a $25,000 reward for information about Cody's whereabouts and to defend Cody's father Corey. His uncle said the police department holding Corey during the initial interview was like kidnapping, that the department stacked up charges to cover up for their wrongdoing. He said, "I thought it was innocent until proven guilty. But if you look at Corey's case, Corey is guilty, according to Hampton, Virginia, until he proves himself innocent. I thought the law worked the other way." Corey's aunt said that her nephew had never been in any trouble, saying he's a provider, he's a good dad, he's not this villain that you think. She went on to echo the sentiments of other family members, that they have no idea where Cody is, but that he isn't dead. She said, "As I prayed and asked the Lord, he told me Cody was alive." Corey's sister said that she waited outside the police department while Corey was being interviewed, and that she was told he was free to leave anytime he wanted to. She disagreed with that last statement, saying there's no way he's free to leave and doesn't want to leave. Even if he wants to help you find his son, he would want to do it from home, around people that love him. She also claimed that the department denied Corey's right to counsel, held him for 4 days without food or water, and attempted to get a false confession. She said, when you go to report your child missing, it's unfortunate that you have to be concerned that you're going to be prosecuted, especially as a black male in this country. She also said that Corey's other children were currently in the foster care system, and that the family has been unable to make contact with them. She said the family members are being vetted, and that the process could take months. She said, I just believe that the Hampton Police Department is trying to cover up for them not doing their part. Corey's child neglect trial was supposed to be held in November, but it was delayed, and his attorneys asked for a mental health evaluation. In January of 2023, a year after Cody went missing, there were still no answers. The chain-link fence with his makeshift memorial still held cardboard signs and stuffed animals, evidence that the community had not forgotten this little boy. Hampton Police Chief Mark Talbot says he's dealt with hundreds of missing people throughout his career, and that this one sticks with him. Speaking about little Cody, Chief Talbot said, we became intimately familiar with how he lived his life. We become intimately familiar with the trauma he experienced while he was living, the kind of deprivation he experienced in his short life. We learn those things through the course of the investigation process. It's deeply traumatic. Although the community remained hopeful, Chief Talbot was more realistic, explaining, through the investigative process, we've encountered a number of things that make us think at this point, very unlikely that Cody Bixby is alive. But also, being alive leaves traces on the world. He isn't available. We can't see him. We haven't heard from him. There's no evidence anyone has spoken to him on the phone or has seen him on video. Haven't seen a photo of him. If he were alive, I think we would know it. If there's no evidence of a human being, especially under these circumstances, if he can't care for himself, he would have to be in the care of somebody else. There's no evidence of that. There never was from the very start. Still, Chief Talbot said that they were not giving up. Gets a briefing every week about the investigation, and has since the start of the case. He said, we've done a lot we can't talk about, and we believe ultimately the work that we have done, and will continue to do, is leading somewhere very important. Despite the grim unlikelihood of finding Cody alive, volunteers continued to search the area with the same determination that they had a year before. Of the searchers, Chief Talbot said, I know that we searched every location that we thought reasonably could be the spot of some evidence of something we could use to find out what happened or evidence of Cody or his remains. We searched all those areas. I don't think they are wasting their time. I also do not think it's likely they will find anything useful. Based on a statement Corey made while locked up at the Hampton Roads Regional Jail, we searched an outdoor area in Maryland near Washington several months prior, but that didn't turn up any leads about Cody's whereabouts either. Investigators also said that the search has been hampered by the fact that Corey didn't have a traditional cellular phone plan that would allow them to gain access to his movements in the days leading up to Cody's disappearance. Instead, he used phones that would only occasionally be hooked up to the free wireless services. An aunt told investigators she talked to Cody by phone about 13 months before he went missing, on either Christmas or Thanksgiving in 2020. As far as investigators can tell, that's the last time anyone besides his father talked to Cody. Neighbors have said Cody and his 3 brothers hardly left the house. The children weren't going to school and didn't have any babysitters. In March of 2023, Corey was transferred to Eastern State Hospital for restorative services and a mental health treatment following a psychiatric evaluation by a court-appointed doctor. This order came after 3 different doctors evaluated Corey and gave differing opinions on his competency to stand trial. After the hearing about this move, Corey's family and attorney said that they believed his declining competency was due to his incarceration, the jail conditions, and the stress of his child being missing. Corey's family said that they believe Cody is still alive, but believe he had been trafficked. They said Hampton police had not done enough to locate the missing boy. Corey's sister said, I believe in my heart. I know Cody is alive, but I believe he's being trafficked somewhere. I believe that my nephew is alive, and one day he'll be returned. Licensed clinical psychologist William McKenna evaluated Corey on May 30th and determined that he was competent to stand trial. Finally, In early June of 2023, Corey Bigsby was indicted by a grand jury on charges of homicide and concealment of a dead body. According to the indictment, Corey was being charged for the death of his son, which happened on or about June 18, 2021, about 7 months before Cody was reported missing. Details were not initially released about what evidence led the investigators to this particular time of death. Corey's sister asserted that the timeline doesn't match up with the last time she saw Cody. She said that her brother Corey and his 4 children, including Cody, attended a gathering at her house in the D.C. area sometime in September or October of 2021. The gathering was to mark the day of her late mother's birthday, and that the boys had been playing outside on the trampoline. She also claimed that another relative had been to Corey's house in December of 2021, that they had seen Cody very much alive at that time. Now, it came as a surprise that on June 21st, Corey was granted bond and released from jail. During the bond hearing, his defense argued that since no evidence had yet been presented, that there was a homicide and that there was no body that Corey was entitled to bond. On the other hand, Hampton attorney Anton Bell told a judge that Corey Bigsby is a danger to the community with a history of going AWOL in the military. Attorney Bell said evidence shows Corey killed his son, and that he believed Corey Bigsby will continue to hide the body if he's released. Ultimately, the judge granted bond, the total for all charges coming to about $80,000. Judge released Corey on house arrest to his older daughter in Norfolk. There were several conditions under this release, including that he cannot have contact with his other young children who live out of state. He also had a curfew and was not to leave the home unless it was for a doctor's appointment or court appearance. In early November of 2023, a hearing was held to determine whether to suppress key evidence during Corey's upcoming trial. Evidence, confessional letters that Corey had allegedly written while in prison and given to a corrections officer. The first letter came on or around August 3, 2022, when Corey got a corrections officer's attention in the early morning and asked him to write a confession letter. The officer became emotional when he read this letter aloud in court, which said, "Found my son unresponsive, tried to give CPR, could not revive him, tried several times. I begged God to save him. I decided to walk outside and spoke with God. Back to the house, checked on my son to see if he was breathing, and tried a long time to realize he was not coming back. I put him in a trash bag and put him in my car, which sat for 3 days." The letter also stated that he then drove his son's body to Garrett A. Morgan Boulevard, a road in Maryland. The officer wrote down this confession, had Corey sign it, then went to get a supervisor. The nighttime supervisor said that the officer was distraught and crying when he brought her the confession. She then went to Corey's cell herself, turned on her body camera, and asked Corey to write his confession down himself. In this letter, Corey wrote, "I, Corey J. Bigsby Sr., am confessing that on January 30th, 2022, I stepped outside of my apartment to get some items out of my car to wash clothes. And when I returned, I found my son, Cody Josiah Bigsby, laying at the bottom of the steps unresponsive. He must have fallen. I then tried to revive him by administering CPR several times over and over until I couldn't anymore. Then I prayed. I stepped outside for a few minutes and talked to God as I prayed. I asked God to allow my son a second chance, and I administered CPR again but got no response, so I panicked and prayed. After that, I placed him into a trash bag and I placed him in the back of my truck. On the 21st of January, around 3:30 a.m., I took him to Garrett A. Morgan Boulevard and placed him into a receptacle bin. After I realized it was a trash can, I took him out and put him into a hole I dug beside a tree inside the tree line. He has tape around his ankles and wrist, a cowboy rug under him, Beats headphones in his ears. I then ate and placed his bike in some trash after I ate at the scene. Another jail officer testified Corey handed her a piece of paper on Christmas of 2022. Said Corey buried Cody after finding him unresponsive on January 31st, 2022. Another confession was found in a notebook in Corey's cell, saying he hit Cody on the head on the floor on June 18, 2021, hit him with fists, put him in the bathtub, then in a fridge before burying him. The defense argued in the hearing that Corey made these statements because of the way he was being treated at the jail and the police station. Cody's lead attorney, Amina Matheny Willard, argued that the statements should have been thrown out because Cody was suffering from trauma brought on by police interrogation that began the day he reported Cody missing. Ultimately, the judge determined that these written confessions were admissible in court for Cody's trial, which was set to begin in early March of 2024. Sadly, in February of 2024, a notice was placed on Cody's memorial fence, notifying people that the memorial was going to be removed. Mourners had asked to keep the memorial up longer, and they were told that it would remain for the 2-year anniversary of Cody's disappearance. Would come down now that someone had been charged with his death. Well-wishers were advised to take down any items they wanted to keep, and the rest would be placed in storage until claimed. Neighbor Nancy Strickland, who had organized many of the memorials for Cody, said, "It breaks my heart that we have to take it down. They can take the fence, but they can never take your memory from me. I love you, Cody Bigsby." Corey's trial began on March 6, 2024. During the trial, Cody's mother, Dina, testified that the last time she saw her little boy alive was when she dropped him off with his father in November of 2020. At the time, Cody was just shy of 3 years old. Dina said she was hospitalized for part of 2020, so she and Cody's father, Corey, met at a 7-Eleven halfway between Hampton and Washington, D.C. for Dina to turn Cody and his brothers over to Corey. But after that, Corey would hardly ever let her speak with her sons. They had made a co-parenting agreement in which she thought the children would spend time at both homes, but that never happened. She said that Corey never gave her his address, and that her phone calls, emails, and texts, which she typically sent several times a month, usually went unreturned. She said, "For the most part, I was ghosted." Dina testified that in early 2021, just a few months before Cody was allegedly killed, Corey sent her an email saying that 3-year-old Cody was inappropriately touching his twin younger brothers, who at that point were 1.5 years old. The email from Corey said, "He's still doing the same stuff, and that Cody needs to come back to you because I don't want to severely hurt him," adding that he needs to see a psychiatrist. Cody never did go back to live with his mother, but Corey sent her a picture of the boy a couple months later on June 14, 2021, the twins' birthday. Dina told the jurors that she was pretty much only able to speak with them on their birthdays. A prosecutor showed Dina the picture of Cody taken about a week before he would have been killed. Dina grew emotional, and it didn't look like the boy she knew. She said he was a laughing, joking, loving child, no issues at all, only love. But in the picture, Dina said he looked sad and frightened. Dina also testified that on January 15, 2022, the day after Cody's 4th birthday, she sent Corey an email that asked, "Where are my kids, Corey? Are they alive?" 2 weeks later, when police called her to tell her that Cody was missing, she said she immediately got on the road and drove to Hampton. During a conversation with detectives and FBI agents investigating the case, she told them that Corey had previously threatened to do violent harm to him. When asked why she didn't do more to see her children during the 14 months after she turned the boys over, she said that she didn't want to drag them through her custody battle. She said that she tried continuously to talk to the boys and insisted several times that she was a good mother who loved her children. On the 4th day of the trial, Cody's brother, now 7 years old, testified remotely through video. He wore a powder blue bow tie and matching suspenders. The boy testified that he found his brother unresponsive on a bed, with his eyes open, saying his face was red, it was dry, and it was bruised. He said that he attempted to shake Cody awake before going downstairs and asking his father what was wrong with Cody. Corey allegedly told him nothing was wrong. During the testimony, Cody's brother began to cry, saying, "I was thinking he was dead." He also testified that he believed he was 4 years old the last time he saw Cody alive, which would have been before December 24, 2021. That would place Cody's death months before he was reported missing on January 31, 2022. In the 7-year-old's conversation with a social services worker, he said he remembered seeing Cody wearing a Superman costume at Halloween, but was not absolutely certain which year he was referring to. The child was also shown pictures of himself and his father, Corey, at Busch Gardens. He said twice that those pictures were taken after the last time he saw his little brother, Cody. A police detective said forensic data from Corey's phone shows those pictures were taken in July of 2021, a month after Corey allegedly killed Cody. The most damning evidence during the trial was, of course, the letters that Corey had written in jail. The correctional officers testified again about how Corey had first asked one of them to write down his confession. Then later, he wrote a longer statement for the supervisor. Those first notes, which gave a location where Corey had allegedly left Cody's body, had prompted a team of police investigators and FBI agents to search a location in Maryland. Despite having cadaver dogs, the search turned up nothing. Later on Christmas Day, Another officer was passing Corey's cell when he passed her another handwritten note. This one said, and I quote, "On January 31st, 2021, I, Bigsby Corey J., attempted to perform CPR on Cody Josiah Bigsby, and it did not work, so I attempted to perform CPR again, and it did not work, so I took him to building 5511 on Garrett A. Morgan Boulevard and buried him beside a tree behind the building, and I walked away." It should be noted that he wrote building, and that the court is not using this as an abbreviation. Then I drove home and prayed to Jesus to save Cody, and I failed him, so I am becoming tired of torture. So now I am confessing because my family and the police is conducting these crimes, and I cannot take it anymore. Sincerely, Corey Bigsby. The jail's medical staff determined that Corey should be placed on a safety watch and moved to a new cell. During this move, the same officer found a black and white composition notebook, which contained a more detailed confession. Both pages of the handwritten confession had big black X's drawn across them, but were still clearly legible. The officer was asked to read aloud this letter in court. It said, "November 5th, 2022, on June 18th, 2021, I, Corey Bigsby, walked in the room and grabbed Cody and dragged him into the kitchen and thumped his head on the floor and beat him with my fist. And he went into cardiac arrest, and I tried to perform CPR. Then he did not respond. Then I went upstairs with Cody and put him into the tub. Then I wet him up to see if he would respond. He did not, so I held him and prayed to God that he'd bring my baby back. Then I took him in the room and laid him in the bed. Then I went to the car and got a flashlight and charged it. I then went to the gas station and got gas. Then I went to the store and got snacks. Then I went to the restroom and pooped and wiped it off. Cody and I went to empty car wash and put Cody in a bag. Then I drove back home and put Cody in the fridge. Then I put Cody in the car again and drove him to building 5511 and dug a hole by the tree and buried him. Then went home and prayed for forgiveness. Then went to King's Dominion the next day, and I went to the hospital, and I dumped my clothes from the crime in the trash and burned them. Then the next day, I went back to burn Cody and cover up scars from the beatings. Then I went home and took a bath with DJ. Please accept my confessions. Sincerely, Corey Bigsby. Corey Bigsby. Week 2 of the murder trial began with the prosecution playing the 911 call that Corey placed to report his son missing. In the call, Corey said, "I think my son is missing. We are moving today. I looked upstairs in his room. I looked everywhere. Last night, he asked to go outside. Sometimes he creeps outside at night." During the initial call, Corey did not know how tall his son was, and when asked what his child was wearing, he said his Spider-Man flip-flops were also missing, so he must be wearing them. The defense called several people to the stand, including Corey's sister and a man who claimed to see Cody just 2 days before Corey reported him missing in January of 2022. During closing arguments, prosecuting attorney Anton Bell said to the jury, "He beat that child with his fists and dumped the child like he was trash. You have the ability to bring to Cody what no one else can bring, and that's accountability." Defense attorney Curtis Brown said to the jurors that he believed there was a lack of forensics, DNA, or fingerprints to prove Corey killed his son and hid his body, saying not one soul saw my client do anything. Prosecutor Bell was able to counter this by saying Cody's eyes were open when his brother found him, so the last image he saw was his dad beating him. The trial wrapped up on March 12, 2024. The jurors took over 2 hours to reach a verdict. Corey was found guilty on both counts, second-degree homicide and concealing a body. Hampton Police Chief Jimmy Weidman, who took over when Chief Mark Talbot left the position for another job in 2023, said that even with the guilty verdict, the search for Cody's body will continue. He said, "Our work isn't done. We still have to look for and recover Cody. Our efforts won't cease until that is accomplished." After the trial, Corey was interviewed at the Western Tidewater Regional Jail in Suffolk, where he maintained his innocence. He said, "I don't know what happened. All I know is, of course, he had to wander away. But did someone take him? I wouldn't know." He claimed that the written confessions were coerced out of him by jail guards, who denied him showers, food, his commissary money, and internet time. Tonight, Bigsby maintains his innocence. Angelica Rentock is in the studio after speaking with him exclusively at the Western Tidewater Regional Jail. Corey Bigsby and I spoke for around half an hour. He says he's choosing to interview now because of what he describes as an unfair trial. And following Bigsby's conviction yesterday, people in the community, especially those who spent so much time searching for Cody, still have unanswered questions. Keep doing what you're doing. I appreciate what you're doing. I need that because as soon as we find Cody, I guarantee you, we'll find out that this is. No, I don't know what Cody is. I never knew what Cody is. And that's unfair too. How are you going to say that I confessed to something? If I confess to it, then I'm telling you, hey, this is where my son is. You should have been able to go get him then, and it should have been over. You should have been able to prove hard facts that I killed my son. Shortly after Corey Bigsby reported his 4-year-old son, Cody, missing to Hampton police, in January of 2022, detectives arrested him on separate child neglect charges. He stayed in Hampton Roads Regional Jail for months. Bigsby alleges mistreatment from the correctional officers. They kept telling me, write a confession letter then. And I kept telling them, I'm not confessing to anything, because there's nothing to confess to. So I said, okay, I'll write a letter because they were telling me what to write through the intercoms. They were telling me what to write down on the paper, and I was telling them I wasn't going to write it. It went from that to them telling me specifically to write certain things that I wrote in the one letter that was X'd out. In that X'd out letter, Bigsby wrote about beating Cody to death on June 18, 2021. But Bigsby tells me he never hurt any of his children. One of his sons testified against him during trial last week. The now 7-year-old said in court, Cody looked dead on the bed in an upstairs bedroom. And all of a sudden, my son come and say some stuff that was coerced, knowing my son never seen his brother laying anywhere lifeless, none of that. On June 18, 2024, the 3-year anniversary of Cody's death, Corey was sentenced to 45 years in prison for the homicide of his son. As appalling as it is, 40 years is the maximum sentence that was allowed for second-degree homicide in Virginia, plus 5 years for concealing a body. He is still facing a possibility of 162 years for the other pending charges of child neglect. In the courtroom, Cody's mother, Dina, spoke about the impact her son's death has had on her and her other children. She said, I have to live with the fact that I put my kids in the hands of a sociopath disguised as a father. She asked the judge for the maximum sentence, saying Corey doesn't deserve to see the light of day again. She said, I pray Cody haunts him for eternity. In January of 2024, 2 years after Cody was first reported missing, a bill was introduced in Virginia to enact a new alert for when a child goes missing. The intent was for this alert to fill the gaps when a case doesn't meet the criteria for an Amber Alert. If you've watched this channel for a while, you probably know that the Amber Alert has strict criteria, including reasonable belief that the child has been abducted, is in imminent danger of bodily harm, and that there's enough descriptive information about the victim and the abductor. Cody's case didn't meet these criteria, as there was no evidence that Cody had been abducted. A new proposed alert called the Cody Alert would broaden the parameters to include pretty much any case where a child is missing, abducted, or not. The new alert, law enforcement could trigger the alert right away, popping up on phones within a 10-mile radius. They could also resend the alert every 10 minutes and widen the radius as needed. The new bill was officially signed into law by the governor in May of 2024. Officials were given a deadline of summer 2025 to set up the new Cody Alert. However, Virginia State Police were able to begin implementing the new alert months ahead of schedule in September of 2024. As of October 16th, 3 Virginia children had received Cody alerts, and all 3 were found safe. According to the Norfolk Police Department, the Cody Alert helped bring a 12-year-old girl home safe earlier this October. Delegate A.C. Cordoza, who helped author the bill for the new Cody Alert, said he helped search for the missing 4-year-old boy who inspired the new alert. He said, I'm glad that we're remembering Cody every time we do one of his alerts. It means the world to me. We want to say, I want everyone to remember what happened here in Hampton and the young man who was lost. What we're doing is making sure that doesn't happen again. We'll be awaiting the verdict for Corey's child neglect trial, which will hopefully end with more jail time than the meager 45 years that he was sentenced for Cody's death. He is currently being held at the Nottoway Correctional Center in Buckville, Virginia. As of the time of this recording, Cody has not revealed the whereabouts of his son's body. It seems likely that Cody is buried in a shallow, unmarked grave, somewhere cold and alone. He has not had a proper burial, no headstone, and now there isn't even a chain-link fence memorial to remember Cody. His memory will have to live on in the hearts of those who knew the little boy with his dimpled smile. We do know that at least his name will live on through the Cody Alert, which is already helping other missing children in just the first couple of months. Maybe his memory will be able to help save the life of some other missing child, even when there was no one there to save him. Amari Jordan Nicholson was born on October 26, 2018 in Nevada to parents Giorgio Hayes and Taylor Nicholson. People who knew him recalled him as a calm, fun, and sweet toddler. He was an adorable little boy with curly brown hair and big brown eyes. Pictures of Amari showed him as a happy child, often smiling and cheerful. Amari's favorite TV character was Mickey Mouse. According to Taylor, her son loved pizza, oranges, and watching Cocomelon on YouTube. Amari enjoyed dancing around to music and was known to be patient with everyone and was just a happy-go-lucky little boy. Jacques Knowles, who was an ex-boyfriend of Taylor's, recalled, "He was just a calm, sweet baby. He was never difficult, never. If you heard him cry, it's because he needed something." Taylor and Jacques had split up the previous summer, but they remained on relatively good terms. However, Amari's biological parents had a strained relationship, and they had broken up before Amari was born. Taylor had claimed that Giorgio was physically violent to her while pregnant. Because of their disdain for each other, they did not have much contact. Though Taylor had sole custody of their son, Giorgio had made attempts to have visitation with Amari during the holiday season of 2021. Now, Giorgio and Taylor had been working on re-establishing a connection for Amari's sake, but progress between them was slow. At the time of our story, Taylor was living with new boyfriend Terrell Rhodes in the Emerald Suites located east of the Las Vegas Strip. Taylor's mother, Carrie Howard, did not have a high opinion of Terrell. She thought Terrell was on drugs and warned Taylor not to date him. Carrie had known Terrell and his family for 12 years and felt he wouldn't be a good partner to her daughter or a good stepfather to Amari. However, Taylor chose not to take her mother's advice, even though Terrell had a criminal record. He had been released from prison following convictions for burglary and robbery the year prior to the start of their relationship. Carrie had also suspected that Terrell had been violent with Taylor and Amari, and she tried to get social services involved as a result. On June 10, 2020, a call was placed to the Clark County Department of Family Services reporting bruises and suspicion of neglect of Amari. DFS conducted an investigation, but the case was officially closed just a few days later on July 14th of 2020. Carrie was dumbfounded that the couple hadn't been drug tested, as she believed it to be a contributing factor in the instability and violence that was taking place in the home. In May of 2021, Taylor was traveling to Colorado to visit her mother, as Carrie had suffered a serious dog bite injury and was recovering from surgery. Taylor left Amari in Terrell's care while she was away caring for her mother. According to Carrie, Amari was supposed to be with Taylor when she came to care for her. In fact, she had bought both of them a one-way ticket to Colorado, as they were supposed to stay at least until the end of May. Instead, Amari disappeared on May 5, 2021, while under Terrell's supervision. Upon learning that Amari had gone missing, Taylor called the police and rushed back home from Colorado, believing that her son had been kidnapped from their home. Over the course of the investigation into Amari's disappearance, interviews with Taylor and Terrell seemed to contradict their original version of events. Terrell told reporters, "We had just woke up. I had just fed him breakfast, and I was in the room on my phone laying down. He's in there playing with his toys, and all of a sudden there's a knock on the door. And it was a woman saying that she was Taylor's baby daddy's sister. And she says she's there to pick up my stepson. I never seen any sides of Taylor's baby daddy's family. So I never recognized her. So then I go to proceed to, okay, I'm going to pack him a bag up, pack some of his belongings. And when that happens, I turn around to call Taylor to tell her if was this really prearranged? And as I'm doing that, the sister says she don't need anything for my stepson. They got everything they need for him, and basically just took off. An Amber Alert was issued, but was subsequently canceled as the state of Nevada requires both a vehicle and an abductor description to meet the criteria for an Amber Alert. Since there was no known vehicle involved in an alleged unknown family member was believed to be responsible for the abduction. The state of Nevada Amber Alert criteria wasn't met. According to Taylor, police told her the reason for canceling the alert was because the matter was now for the courts, as they believed it was a family issue and not an abduction by a stranger. When the reporter questioned Terrell as to why he would let Amari be taken by someone he didn't know, he replied that Taylor told him someone would be there to collect Amari, but he just didn't know who. In the beginning, Taylor claimed that she never said that. However, the couple would go back and forth on whether or not Taylor did or did not say someone would be coming by for Amari. Taylor initially stuck to Terrell's version of events. Couples shifted the focus away from Terrell, by suggesting that Giorgio's family stalked them until they figured out where she and Amari lived. Taylor and Giorgio weren't on the best of terms with each other. They were asserted that Terrell didn't have anything to do with her son's disappearance, placing the blame squarely on Amari's father. Taylor would also complain to a reporter that Giorgio was getting media attention without playing a meaningful role in his son's life. Taylor continued to stand by Terrell and came to his defense when rumors began to fly and the public began to look more closely at him. She told reporters it's inaccurate. It's a bunch of strangers just reading comments and not understanding the situation, not understanding the background, and just trying to put their 2 cents into it when it's all inaccurate. All this negative, hateful energy of pointing fingers at me and him can be put into trying to find our baby and bring him home instead of causing more drama. I mean, we're hurting enough. We're all distraught over this. We're a complete mess breaking down. Despite the public suspicion, Taylor would not waver in her support of Terrell. The kidnapping narrative began to crumble, however, when Taylor later admitted to reporters that she and Terrell had been arguing prior to her leaving for Colorado. She said that telling him someone would be by to pick up Amari was basically an empty threat meant to annoy him. She hadn't been specific about when or even if a pickup would occur. Terrell was upset about Taylor leaving for Colorado, and there were whispers of an impending breakup before Taylor had even left. Taylor had then acknowledged to reporters that the situation was confusing and would lead people to believe that she and Terrell were lying about the events that took place. The couple's conflicting stories of the events were putting eyes on them both, not just Terrell. People were looking closer at Taylor now. Despite the incongruence at that time, Taylor still maintained that Terrell had nothing to do with her son being missing. When the news reached Carrie, she was quite upset with her daughter. Taylor hadn't contacted her to tell her what had happened, and Carrie had to hear the news from her own father. The grandmother was beside herself with grief that Taylor had left Amari in Terrell's care. She was also confused as to why Taylor didn't take Amari with her to Colorado like they had originally talked about. During an interview, Taylor declined to say why she had opted not to take Amari to Colorado with her. According to Carrie, all Taylor had to do was ask, and they would have helped her if she needed them. A rift had regrettably began to form between the two, and it didn't appear that mother and daughter had much contact during the investigation. In fact, May 8, 2021 was the last time Carrie and Taylor had spoken while Amari was still missing. They were at odds over the whole situation, and hadn't been talking to each other as Taylor continued to stand by Terrell. On May 7, 2021, Taylor told reporters, "Terrell loves Amari like he's his own. He's been the one who's been taking care of Amari. Amari loves Terrell just as much at this point. You can't sit here and say anything negative for a man to be taking care of another man's baby. He never handed the baby off to anybody." Terrell remarked that it was sick that people were making assumptions about what happened to Amari and thinking that he had been involved. He was annoyed that people believed that he was gaslighting Taylor into believing him. During this particular speech, Terrell avoided looking at the camera and would shift his gaze to his feet or off into the distance. Still, Taylor wouldn't hear anyone would criticize Terrell. Message to the public is, we miss our baby boy, and if he's watching, mommy and daddy loves you, and we hope you get home soon and safely. To the public, just, share our posts on Facebook, share the news reports, and try to get the word out and his picture around, and keep on a lookout to be able to find, where he is and to be able to bring him home back safe and sound. My mom got attacked by a dog, and it chewed her tendon in her ankle, so she had to have 2 hours of surgery and over 60 stitches, so she was crippled, not able to walk. So I left on Friday to go to help take care of her, and I had only been gone 4 days before I woke up to a phone call saying my son was gone. And when I found that out, I hopped in the car and drove 2.5 hours to get to the airport, since it's a small little country city, and hopped on the next plane and landed in Vegas around 2:30, and then that's when the search was able to happen. I had called police at 7 in the morning to be able to report him as the missing child, and the responders came out, and one called and spoke to me over the phone, the other talked to my boyfriend about the situation of what happened, and it was that they had a misunderstanding and canceled the search, and so my son was missing for 8 hours with nobody looking for him. And then when I came in town, and they were finally able to speak to me, is when they finally were able to report him as missing, and they've searched everything trying to do what they can. We just wish it was, a little bit more. From my knowledge, I was already notified that somebody would be coming over, but I didn't think when I didn't know when I didn't expect when. And then when somebody did come, they notified themselves as my girlfriend, baby daddy's sister, and they said they was sure to pick up the mark and notified me that it was already prearranged, so from my understanding from already being told by my girlfriend that somebody would be over. I wasn't told who I wasn't told when, but I still had that in the back of my mind, so when that person knocked on the door, that's what my mind recommended right back to, so that's who I thought was gonna pick up Amari. And as I'm finna call my girlfriend and pack back his bag at the same time, she says that they already got everything that they need for him, and I don't need to pack anything, he'd be fine. And she regulated, and she proceeded out the door, and as I'm on the phone trying to call my girlfriend, I that my last look of her was just walking down the stairs, so I closed the door, and I started calling my girlfriend over and over until she answered the phone, and I asked her was anybody supposed to come that day to pick up Amari, and she said no. I said the lady just came to the door, says that she's her baby daddy's sister, and they just picked up Amari, and she started freaking out. That's when I ran out the door, and immediately start coming to area looking around, see what I can. I ain't see nothing. Bring her son back, wherever you are bringing back, like immediately. It's disgusting. I mean, he's a helpless 2-year-old, he's tiny, and can't fight back. He doesn't know where he's at, doesn't know where mommy and daddy are, because we're the only 2 people that he knows, and he needs medicine. He's scared. He doesn't know who these people are, and we just asked to bring him back safe and sound because he doesn't deserve this. This is not okay. And it's what's really sickening is that people is making assumptions, thinking that I have something to do with it, that I have her manipulated in some way, which that's sickening to me also, because he loves me. We ain't never nothing like that, apparently not now. We're just waiting, hoping something pops into the air, someone slips up, and he's able to return home. So we're gonna try to plan out a search party for him and see how that works out. We're gonna do the best we can and do whatever we can to find him. We're gonna create the search party on Facebook, in a Facebook event. It's gonna be public, and we try to advise anyone who's free, not doing anything, to come out and try to help us find him, comb through the city, see if he's anywhere in sight. We have a few ideas where he could be, and the police are just saying that it's an ongoing investigation, so they're not able to share much, and we can't share all the details either, because it's still ongoing, and we don't want to interrupt the process of trying to find him, and so we're just waiting and trying to figure this out on our own as well. All right, thank you guys. Now, how Taylor's side of the family came across in the media was chaotic at best, while Durjo's side of the family came across quite the opposite, clear and proactive. Durjo's sisters Yolanda Everett and Dyrika Perryman were careful in their comments regarding Taylor. They didn't want to speculate or throw unnecessary animosity in an already tense situation. Yolanda and Dyrika firmly denied that their family had anything to do with Amari being missing, but admitted to a strained relationship with his mother. Sisters publicly affirmed that despite the difficulties between them, they've been more than willing to work with Taylor to help her find Amari. The sisters were active law enforcement efforts and participated in a live news conference 6 days into the search, asking anyone with any information pertaining to Amari to come forward. Several search teams had been involved, going door to door and handing out flyers. In partnership with Nevada Child Seekers, reward of $30,000 was offered to anyone who could bring Amari home safely. On May 11, 2021, sometime after the news conference, Terrell finally broke down after being confronted with evidence of soiled clothes and blood found on the wall of his apartment. He finally took responsibility for Amari's disappearance. Terrell admitted that he had struck Amari several times with a closed fist after the boy had wet himself. Amari stopped breathing and he tried to perform CPR, but he couldn't revive the boy before finally telling the truth to authorities. Terrell held up the facade that Amari had been kidnapped. On May 8, 2021, 3 days into the search, he told reporters, "I just want him back where he needs to be, back with us. This is not a finger-pointing game. Our son is really missing." Less than a week later, the truth would come out and prove him to be a coward and a liar. After coming clean, Terrell suddenly lost his composure. He began crying, babbling incoherently, and began to mentally break down. He attempted to grab a police officer's gun. Terrell lunged over the table at the seated officer, while a standing officer was attempting to console him. He struggled with the officer's holster, but the seated officer immediately had Terrell's hand gripped tight to restrain his access. 2 more officers from outside the room came in to assist the other officers and restrain Terrell well. Right now we're getting a look at the moment of murder. Suspect grabbed a gun from police officers as he was being interviewed, but Rhodes is accused of killing 2-year-old Amari Nicholson. Now police say during the interview, as you see here, Rhodes gets violent, asking officers to kill him. Right now he's facing attempted murder charges after pulling the gun on the officers. Now thankfully no one was hurt in this confrontation. The grand jury evidence also shows the map that Rhodes drew allegedly pointing officers to Amari's body. According to court documents, Rhodes told officers that he killed Amari. After he wet his pants, Terrell was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, 2 counts of attempted murder, 4 counts of assaulting a police officer with a deadly weapon, and 4 counts of resisting a police officer with a deadly weapon. Clark County Sheriff Joe Lombardo was shown where to find Amari's body during the confession. However, Terrell hadn't been completely honest in regards to what he had done with his body at that time. So the search for Amari continued after Terrell's arrest. Law enforcement believed they would not locate a body in this case, but Terrell eventually drew them a map, as shown in the video. On May 12, 2021, Amari's body was found buried in a shallow grave at Paradise Road and East Twain Avenue, near a brick wall between Siegel Suites and McDonald's. This location was right around the corner from the complex they were living in. Some reports have suggested that Amari was found in a dumpster. Terrell has not spoken publicly to reporters since his official arrest. When Carrie found out what Terrell had done, she told the reporters she didn't think Terrell would go as far as to end Amari's life, but she wasn't shocked that he had done so. After all, Carrie had spoken against the relationship from the start and had called for an investigation into suspected violence in their home. The previous year, midday, the mother of a 2-year-old allegedly murdered by her boyfriend, opening up about her heartbreaking loss. Marie Nicholson's body was found earlier this week near Paradise in Twain. Taylor Nicholson says right now she's trying her best to cope and remember the good times with him being gone. You know, it's getting difficult. You still see him running around, you still see everything, you still hear everything, and now we just gotta live through what he loves the most to keep his spirit close to all of us. Metro Police say Terrell Rhodes was taking care of Amari while Taylor was in Colorado caring for her mom. In an arrest report, Rhodes admitted to hitting Amari several times after the toddler urinated on himself. Police say Rhodes and Taylor were dating and just broke up before Amari's death. When Taylor heard the truth, it was the final blow to her trust and confidence in Terrell. She felt betrayed. However, the time had come for her to take responsibility for the fact that she had stubbornly stood by Terrell's version of events. Knowing she was never serious about anyone coming to pick up Amari, the public had already been looking at Taylor with a measure of suspicion, and the truth coming out finally put more focus on Taylor's handling of events. If Taylor knew there was never a plan to actually have someone pick up Amari, why did she believe Terrell's version of the events? Why didn't she doubt Terrell's story? Instead of feeling guilty, Taylor took a defensive stance. She felt she couldn't fully grieve her son in peace, and that people she once knew, people she hadn't spoken to in months or even years, were judging her, and in some cases hating on her for how she was dealing with such a public tragedy. Taylor said she was always someone who kept her feelings inside and did not like to display what she was dealing with to the outside world. Taylor was advised to stay home, out of the view of the media, as she may not be safe with the amount of hate she was receiving. Terrell was held in Clark County Detention Center following his arrest. His trial would be delayed and pushed back several times. Although the reasons for these setbacks have not been made clear, Terrell waited around in prison, riding the delays for 3 years before accepting the plea deal. 3 months before his trial, Terrell was officially sentenced on July 30th, 2024. His attorney Robert Langford negotiated a deal of 20 years to life for the murder charge and a sentence of an additional 1 to 6 years for each of the assault charges. A sentence of 20 years to life would mean Terrell wouldn't be eligible for parole until 2041, excluding time for the additional years added for the charges he accumulated for resisting his arrest. According to attorney Langford, his client is mentally tortured every day by what he did. Amari's father believed that Terrell should have had to face the death penalty for what he had done to his son Amari. He said, yeah, he should look death in the face like Amari did. It's only fair that you look death in the face like the child did. Prosecutors said on June of 2021 that they would not pursue the death penalty against Terrell. Terrell wouldn't be the only one finding themselves in hot water with law enforcement. That year, Taylor was arrested in June of 2021 on charges of solicitation and carrying a concealed weapon. She had met a man at the MGM Grand Hotel and Casino who happened to be an undercover officer. This man chatted her up and bought her a drink at the bar. They had discussed a transaction for activities, and once terms were agreed upon, walked together to a room within the hotel. There, Taylor was met by officers who placed her under arrest. Her purse contained brass knuckles and condoms. Taylor was held at the Clark County Detention Center on a $5,000 bail. She waived her right to a trial and pled no contest to solicitation and carrying a concealed weapon. The judge must have taken pity on Taylor, as she was given Time served for the incident. Amari's tragic story had a significant impact on the community around where they lived. Citizens of Las Vegas were upset with DFS's response to the CA and neglect complaint. They were bothered by the short length of investigation given to the complaint and the canceling of the Amber Alert when he first went missing. Too often reports are made to CPS agencies that yield no findings, only for a serious incident to occur a short time after carry for one believed that had. They looked further into the complaint that occurred in July of 2020 that Amari would still be alive. The community felt changes needed to be made on how the department handled child endangerment complaints and the criteria for Amber Alerts across the state of Nevada. Many felt the investigation put forth by the Clark County DFS wasn't well conducted. Further community involvement in this case had produced a petition for new legislation dubbed Amari's Law that requests the following issues be looked at. Amber Alerts should be made for any and all missing children under the age of 18, whether or not a vehicle is involved and or person of interest description is available. An alert should be sent out with a description of the child and the last person they were seen with, regardless of whether or not they are family to the missing. When a case is reported with Clark County DFS, the cases should have a more thorough investigation done by speaking with anyone with concerns, including family, neighbors and friends, to understand the scope of the threat to the well-being of the child. There should be more than one visit from an agency representative if a report is made, even if evidence wasn't seen the first time. Parents should be held accountable for leaving their children in the care of someone known to be violent or otherwise neglectful. Our county DFS cannot deny that there is a problem when every week there are multiple stories of a child suffering violence at the hand of a non-blood related parent like caregiver. Of course, there will always be exceptions when supervision is performed by a non-romantic caregiver, such as a babysitter, daycare, or foster care provider. The evidence will clear the parents of any ethical wrongdoing, but a romantic partner should be subject to higher scrutiny and some accountability placed on the biological parent who made that choice when it results in harm to their child. Community also wanted to work on building more outreach programs for families and victims of violence in Amari's name, teaming up with other nonprofits in different areas of the country to establish a wider network to assist families in need. Unfortunately, it appears the petition didn't gain the traction it needed for further support. The public did respond with several events to honor Amari's memory. Memorial t-shirts were made and a candlelight vigil with balloons, toys, and stuffed animals was held outside the Seagull Suites on May 13, 2021, not far from where Amari's body was finally found. Another public memorial and balloon release was held on May 17, 2021. Again, the Misery Machine does not condone or promote balloon releases. A mobile memorial starting on Cambridge Street was held on May 19, 2021. For those who missed the original memorials, people wrote messages and taped pictures of Amari to their cars and drove through the neighborhood blasting music. Another vigil was held a year later on May 13, 2022 to honor the one-year anniversary of Amari's passing near Paradise Road and East Twain Avenues, close to where his body was found. Community members did not easily forget Amari Nicholson. A song called Young Amari Song by rap artist called Set was dedicated to Amari. We'll have a link to it in our description if you're interested in checking it out. The Nicholson family did not set up fundraisers for the funeral and burial expenses. A few fundraisers were set up by people claiming to be family members, but they were just scammers trying to take advantage of the family's grief and profit from a public tragedy. Those scam sites were rightfully and promptly shut down. Amari was officially laid to rest in the new Mesquite City Cemetery in Mesquite, Nevada. His headstone contains a portrait of himself on the front and the poem When I Must Leave You by Helen Steiner Rice on the back, which reads, "When I must leave you for a while, please always carry along with you a great big smile. Please do not grieve and shed wild tears and hug your sorrow to you through the years, but start out bravely with a gallant smile. And for my sake and in my name live on, and do all things the same. Feed not your loneliness on empty days, but fill each waking hour in useful ways. Reach out your hand in comfort and in cheer, and I in turn will comfort you and hold you near. And never, never be afraid to die, for I am waiting for you in the sky." Case 3. Melinda Jean Hoagland was born on July 4, 2012 in Chester County, Pennsylvania. She had 3 sisters, Emily, Abby, and Jamie, who are all significantly older and are all adults as the date of this recording in November of 2024. Melinda had blue eyes, light brown hair, and a sweet smile. In most of her photos, her hair is shoulder length or longer, but by her 12th birthday, it was cut into an asymmetrical shag, shoulder length on one side and almost shaved on the other. According to her sister Emily, because Melinda was born on the 4th of July, She grew up thinking that the fireworks were for her. She said Melinda was a bubbly child who loved the world for what it was and loved being in it. Her sister Jamie said that Melinda was a miracle baby. She said she had a hard time coming into this world, but soon grew into a healthy, energetic child. She described her as a beautiful, cheerful, and outgoing girl who really loved life. Jamie said she was always a go-getter and wanted to be part of the fun. Melinda loved older movies. Jamie said she was very advanced in her time and loved movies that were made way before she was even a thought. She also loved school, got good grades, and was an honor student. In pictures from happier times, she cuddled with her sister's dogs, giving them a big hug even though they were bigger than she was. Another photo captured her smiling and eating a cupcake with blue sprinkles. Blue was her favorite color. In another, she drank a milkshake while sporting a silly grin. In her elementary school graduation photo, she stood tall and looked proud wearing a red academic robe with sleeves so long that her little hands didn't show. Her family shared a video clip taken from when she was younger that shows the love for life that she had. In the video, she played the children's game Pie Face. The game centers around a hand-cranked gadget that bonks the losing player in the face with a dollop of whipped cream. On her turn, Melinda moved the crank cautiously. She was startled for a second when the whipped cream hit her in the nose, but quickly broke out in a smile and a laugh. She scooped a bit of the whipped cream off of her nose and gave it a taste, turning her loss into a happy and sweet moment. The name of Melinda's mother has been kept out of the press in order to protect her privacy. Her father was Rendell Hoagland, and he was also the father of her older sisters that they shared a different mother. The older girls were raised by Rendell and their mother up until Jamie, the second youngest, was about 5 years old. Then the couple divorced. They said their father could be strict at times, and he believed in spanking and corporal punishment, but they claimed he wasn't violent when he was raising them. They said he did have a history of misusing prescription medicine in the past, but it seemed those struggles were behind him. About 8 years after the divorce, Melinda was born. Though the older girls primarily lived with their mother, Rendell had visitation, and they regularly spent time with their father. By all accounts, Melinda's early life was a happy one. As the youngest daughter, she was considered Rendell's favorite. Jamie said she had charmed her father, and the dad she knew would have done anything for Melinda. Eventually, Rendell and Melinda's mother split up, and at first she stayed with her mother, who had primary custody. However, a few things happened over the next few years that changed Melinda's life significantly. First, according to family members, Melinda's mother was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, an autoimmune disease that causes the body to attack the protective covering of the nerves in the brain and spinal cord. While some cases of MS can be mild, Melinda's mother was not one of the lucky ones. Her medical condition got progressively worse to the point where she was profoundly disabled. She wasn't able to take care of herself, let alone take care of a child, and she had to be moved into an assisted living facility. Still though, Melinda had her father to take care of her, and other loving family members as well. From 2018 to the middle of 2020, Sister Jamie lived with Melinda and her father, and Melinda continued to excel in school, trying to make the best of difficult circumstances. Around that time, Rendell met Cindy Warren, and his new relationship would cause heartache and pain for all of his children. When Rendell met her, Cindy had custody of her own child, a little boy we will call G, who was born around 2016. At first glance, she seemed like a decent mom. The boy seemed healthy, happy, and cared for. But he wasn't her first child, and Cindy had several secrets that would make anyone question her suitability to take care or even be around children. Now, back in the 1990s, Cindy began a relationship with a man named McKinley Warren, and in 1996, she and McKinley had their first child together, who was a son. The next year, she had another son with McKinley, but that wouldn't be the only baby he fathered that year. After what he called a one-night stand with a different woman, she became pregnant with his child and gave birth to a daughter named Jessica Bach in 1997. Now, Jessica's mother struggled with an addiction to crack, so the toddler was sent to live with McKinley and Cindy in 1999. Within 2 months, she stopped speaking and trying to walk, lost weight, and cried all of the time. Monroe County Child Protective Services removed her from their home and placed her into foster care, but the agency returned her to the couple in September of 1999 after she was diagnosed with a failure to thrive. On December 1st, 2000, McKinley took Jessica to the ER with a head injury. He told him she'd accidentally fallen out of his car, smacking her head against the edge of the sidewalk. The next day, she died from her injuries. Later that month, Cindy and McKinley got married. Although her death was ruled a homicide, no arrests were made because, according to the Monroe County DA, we couldn't say definitively whether or not Warren or his wife Cindy killed the child. As usual in cases like this, CPS didn't release many details because of privacy issues, but newspaper reporters were able to track down where the children were living based on public records. It is unclear whether the couple briefly lost custody of the other two boys while police investigated Jessica's death. But if so, they soon got the boys back and Cindy had another child with McKinley. January of 2003, all three of their children were placed in foster care until April of that year, when they were placed in a kinship care with an undisclosed family member. In late 2005 or early 2006, Cindy had another son who was taken shortly after birth and was placed into foster care. She claimed McKinley was the father, but he didn't believe her until a paternity test proved the child was his. In February of 2006, the infant along with his siblings were returned to the couple's care. During her interactions with the agency, Cindy learned that their primary goal was reunifying families, and she learned to say what the social workers wanted to hear, so they would return her children to her. But the reality inside the Warren home was far different than what she said. In 2007, an anonymous call was made to CPS reporting the terrible CA Cindy's 3-year-old son was suffering. While the older kids were in school, the youngest was trapped at home and seemed to bear the brunt of his parents' anger. Sometimes the toddler was kicked out of the house and locked outside all day while his siblings were in school. Other times he was locked inside a bedroom for days and not allowed out. His older siblings were allowed to hit him. The caller said the boy was covered in bruises and doesn't talk because he is abused. A police officer and CPS caseworker investigated, first talking to the older siblings who said they were afraid of their father and claimed they'd seen him hit their youngest brother. When the officials asked to see the boy, his siblings brought him to the door. Toddler was wearing nothing but underwear, so the officials could see all the injuries on his body. They noted multiple bruises, ligature marks, a burn and injuries to his head, similar to the head injuries little Jessica suffered many years prior. As a result of the investigation, police finally had enough evidence to arrest both Cindy and McKinley for Jessica's death 7 years earlier. Cindy took a plea deal and agreed to testify against McKinley. He's found guilty of beating his daughter to death and sentenced to 50 years in prison. He's currently still serving that sentence at SCI Phoenix in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. The murder charges against Cindy were dropped, but she pled guilty to child endangerment for the CA of her 3-year-old son. It was sentenced to 3 to 7 years in prison. She got out sometime between 2010 and 2014. By 2016, she was pregnant again and gave birth to her son, G, who she was caring for when she met Rendell sometime around 2018. Once she saw that her father's relationship with Cindy seemed to be getting serious, Melinda's sister Emily wanted to know more about her. So she Googled Cindy's name. She was shocked to find out that she had been in prison for CA. Concerned, she told her father about what she had found. She said, "I had said something to my dad like, 'Hey Dad, do you know what this woman has been accused of? Do you know what she's done?'" Emily was surprised when she realized he had known all along. She said he told her, "We don't talk about that." Now, even though she was a grown adult and had a friendly relationship with him, he didn't want to hear about her concerns. When she continued to express them, he told her, "You're my child, not my friend. You can't correct me." And Cindy backed him up. The two of them then cut Emily out of their life and out of Melinda's life too. Jamie tried another tactic to remain in Melinda's life. She realized that criticizing Cindy wouldn't be well received. So she kept her opinions to herself and tried to look for signs that Cindy was a changed person. Jamie noted that Cindy's son seemed happy and joyful, and her father would do anything for Melinda. She didn't like Cindy, but trusted her father to step in and protect Melinda if anything bad happens. By holding her tongue, Jamie was allowed to have some small contact with Melinda, sending her birthday and Christmas presents. She said that they talked about getting together in person, but the family always seemed to have plans whenever Jamie was free. Though she found it frustrating that their schedules never aligned, she didn't find it overly suspicious. Her father went camping a lot and was often away from home. Also, Cindy didn't like any of the adult daughters very much, and that seemed a reason enough for her to want to avoid them. Though she wasn't very active on social media, Cindy occasionally made public posts, mostly selfies. On June 17th of 2020, she celebrated her birthday online, by posting a fundraiser for the organization No Kid Hungry, perhaps trying to show the public that she cared about children. That same year, Rendell was awarded full-time custody of Melinda. The custody agreement contained the following stipulation: the minor child shall not be left in the care of Cindy Warren, father's fiancée, for any period of time exceeding 1 hour unless expressly agreed upon by mother and father through written communication. Though Cindy was listed on the paperwork as Rendell's fiancée, she remained married to her first husband. Given Cindy's history, this seemed like a reasonable stipulation, and it could have protected Melinda if Rendell had actually followed it, but he seemed to be following his heart instead. His relationship with Cindy got more and more serious. In September of 2021, he posted an image online that read, "Find someone who is proud to have you, scared to lose you, fights for you, appreciates you, respects you, cares for you, and loves you unconditionally." Above the image, he wrote "done," followed by heart and kissing emojis. The next month, November 2021, Melinda went to her last doctor's visit. At 10 years old, a healthy weight for her would fall between 54 and 106 pounds. So at 77 pounds, she was perfectly healthy and normal for her age. That same month, text between Cindy and Rendell first mentioned an assault resulting in an injury to Melinda. Next year of 2022, Cindy and Rendell moved to a home on Reed Road in a rural part of Chester County, 2 hours away from Melinda's sisters and other family. Despite the custody order, which prohibited Cindy from living with and caring for Melinda, she and her son moved in with Rendell and Melinda. Around this time, Rendell took Melinda to see her mother for the last time. Spring of 2022, Melinda started attending North Brandywine Middle School. During summer break, June to September, evidence suggests that Rendell and Cindy started to punish her by making her hold painful stress positions for long periods of time. They also started restricting her food and water as a form of punishment. Meanwhile, Rendell was trying to keep up the appearance of a happy family online. Around the holidays, he posted a picture of the family Christmas ornament. For reindeer, each labeled with one of their names, Rendell, Cindy, Melinda, and G. At the base of the ornament, it read, 2022, Fourth Christmas Together. No reindeers were included for Rendell's older daughters, and no mention was made of the 4 children Cindy had lost custody of years before. On December 24th, Rendell posted a picture of Melinda and G cutting out sugar cookies to bake for Santa. That same month, they also recorded a 30-minute video in which they forced Melinda to hold books over her head while they yelled at her and hit her. Over the next months, they would increase their physical and psychological torture, threatening to punish her even more severely for the smallest infractions and isolating her from anyone who could help. In January of 2023, Melinda was still going to in-person school. When she had bruises or other marks, the couple would cover them with makeup. However, in the months of February and March, she missed almost 1 month of school after getting a bad rug burn on her face that couldn't be concealed with makeup. School was her safe place, her chance to get away from her father and Cindy, a place where she was treated like a human being. And she must have been devastated to have to be taken away from it that long. They let her go back to school after her face healed, but she had to take another long absence after she was beaten and left with more bruises too big to cover up. In sharp contrast to the misery Melinda was enduring, a social media post Rendell made on May 6th featured a photo of a vase full of a dozen roses on their kitchen counter with the caption, "Just because flowers." Later that month, Melinda and the rest of the family accompanied Rendell to a chili cook-off competition a few hours away. When Jamie heard he was competing, she arranged to attend as well. She was disappointed when she didn't see Melinda at the competition that day and asked to stop by the hotel they were staying at later that night. Describing the meeting, she said, "When I went in, it was a rainy day. It was cold outside. When I went into their room, it was at least 60 degrees. There's no doubt it was super cold in there. She was under a big, fluffy blanket. She never really got up, but to me, it was never a red flag. She's a child. She's cold. She's going to stay in that bed. She doesn't need to get up for me." Looking back on it now, hindsight is 20/20. They probably planned that. We were alone. I asked her about how things were going. How was it living with Cindy? She never gave me any kind of red flag. She never gave me anything. She continued to talk about how she loved school, how she was moving on in her grade, how she loved her favorite movies. When Rendell and Cindy came back to the room, they said it was time for bed and asked Jamie to leave. Melinda never told Jamie anything about what was happening to her. At this time, Officials believed that Melinda had been reprogrammed to accept the treatment that she was suffering as an unavoidable part of her life. She was too afraid to tell anyone because she believed if she did, it would only get worse. On July 3, 2023, Rendell posted 2 pictures of Melinda online. In one, she was just a toddler sitting on a small bed, smiling up at the camera. The other picture appeared to be current or close to it. She was wearing a school t-shirt from G's elementary school and had a closed-mouth smile. Her eyes were dark, and it looked like she was wearing makeup. Her hair looked thinner than usual and was cut very short on one side. Above her pictures, Rendell wrote, "Happy 12th birthday, Melinda. Hope you have many, many more. We love you." Though he might have hoped she might have many more birthdays, he wasn't doing anything to help her survive until the next one. That same month, the couple installed Blink security cameras in multiple rooms inside their home. With multiple cameras recording throughout the day, they could track her movements and actions even more closely and find even more reasons to punish her. On August 4th, Rendell posted on social media that he and Cindy had taken a vacation to New Jersey. He posted several pictures of Cindy and a picture of himself posing with her, but no pictures of Melinda or G. His comment above the photos read, "Enjoying our time together with the kids at Seaside Heights," but he didn't enjoy their company enough to include any images of them. On October 8th, he and Cindy were back on the beach in New Jersey. This time, he didn't even mention the children. His caption read, "Last-minute outing, living our best life," above several photos in which he and Cindy pose and purse their lips as if kissing. By this time, Melinda had missed 35 days of school. 10 of them were excused and 25 of them unexcused, far exceeding the permitted amount allowed. The school district had made 2 reports to CPS using the child line. It's unclear exactly what was contained in those reports because the agency did not release any details about it. A social worker called the house and spoke to Rendell, and possibly spoke to Cindy and Melinda as well, though the reporting on that still is not entirely clear. What is clear is that the agency closed the case without completing a home visit. After the reports in November of 2023, Rendell removed Melinda from in-person school and enrolled her in online classes. A representative of the school district summed up the event saying, "Our staff diligently reported concerns about her welfare to the state agency that receives and manages concerns. Shortly thereafter, she was withdrawn from our schools. Cindy's son, G, remained enrolled in his school. Only Melinda was kept home. Once she was no longer leaving the house, Melinda's punishments got stranger and even more severe. Video evidence from December showed her shackled for the first time. On many occasions, she was chained to furniture and forced to exercise. They made her do hours of push-ups and squats and walking or marching in place. They forced her to stand for hours and hold a book over her head. They punished her for not smiling in her Zoom classes, sneaking food to eat, moving her hair out of her face, forgetting a chore, dropping a book, or failing to perform an exercise to their standards. Video clips recorded both Cindy and Rendell yelling and berating Melinda for these and other perceived slights they had. They didn't just force her to do things to hurt her body. They also attacked her mind. They told her they were going to kill her. They belittled her and called her worthless and an idiot. They exchanged multiple text messages discussing her punishments. They also left a trail of texts discussing how they would hide her condition from family members, teachers, and anyone else that might report their actions. Video Cindy recorded showing Melinda crying while trying to hold a stack of books above her head. She asked to be forgiven for dropping the books. Instead, Cindy beat her with a spatula and told her that her father would beat her even worse when he got home. In addition to the forced exercise and stress positions, officials also found evidence that they were starving Melinda. In one video clip, Cindy told her to keep moving and don't look for breakfast or lunch tomorrow because you're not getting it, and you won't get dinner either because I'm not getting up. They had absolute power over Melinda, and they used it in some of the most vile ways possible to the fullest extent. Rendell helped torture his daughter behind closed doors, but online, he and Cindy still tried to look like a happy family. At Christmas, Rendell revealed a new family ornament. In this one, 3 chubby penguins sat on a red sled, each one labeled with a name. Rendell, Cindy, and G's penguins all had seats in the front, but Melinda's penguin was standing alone behind the rest of them. Though it seems unlikely they picked the ornament to reinforce her isolation, in hindsight, it seemed like another warning. Rendell took pictures on Christmas Day, but didn't post them until January 6th. G received a number of expensive-looking gifts, including an air-powered BB gun, a new cell phone, a remote-controlled stunt vehicle, Xbox gift cards, and a new Galaxy tablet. Melinda mostly got clothes. After unwrapping each item, she smiled and posed while holding it up against her. At first glance, it wasn't obvious that she had gotten quite thin because she was wearing a baggy black sweatshirt layered over other clothes. The final presents for both children were 2 new bicycles with big red bows. Both children stood with their bikes and smiled for the camera. By this time, they were regularly shackling Melinda to various pieces of furniture, so it's hard to imagine she could even pretend she'd get to ride and play on her bike like any other child. But we hope she got to dream a little about pedaling away so fast that she could feel the wind in her hair. Melinda was allowed to attend her online classes, but she was shackled to the desk during her lessons and monitored via the Blink cameras. She didn't have to be on video for class. The other punishments continued. On February 6th, a video clip showed Melinda chained to the dresser in her bedroom. She was marching in place at around 3 p.m., but an hour later, a video showed she had been moved to the basement and shackled to an air hockey table. Her arms were above her head, and Cindy yelled at her through the Blink camera. 10 additional clips taken from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. that night, a 5-hour period, all showed her holding her arms above her head. A sheer force of will that must have been incredibly painful for anybody, not to mention a girl her age. Video from early morning that next day, February 7th, which fell on a Wednesday, showed her sleeping on the bare basement floor while chained to the table. She was chained to the table and forced to sleep on the basement floor on multiple occasions. On one occasion, she woke up and had to go to the bathroom, but she had no way to summon help, so she was forced to go where she was, and she was punished for it the next day. On this night, though, she slept through. Video at 7:30 showed her still asleep. Another video 5 minutes later showed her awake, sitting up, and already holding her arms above her head. Later that day, presumably after school, she was chained to the table again and walking in place. At 5:53 p.m., Cindy yelled a true gem of parental advice through the camera, saying, "Melinda looks a little tied up at the moment, and because of her, she has pains in her cooter hole and won't move." Melinda responded to her crazy statement with an apology, saying, "Please, I'm sorry. I know I can't move, and I'm sorry." On February 8th, a Thursday, Melinda was shackled to the dresser doing squats at 11:40 a.m. No explanation was given as to why she wasn't attending class via Zoom. Another video clip at 3:46 p.m. showed her still doing squats. This time, she was chained to the air hockey table. Cindy told her she could take a 10-minute break, and Melinda said, "Okay, thank you." On Sunday, February 11th, a video clip showed Melinda again cuffed the air hockey table. She was resting on her hands and knees. Through the camera, Cindy told her to jump up. She said that if she did it again, that Cindy would come in and kick her in the teeth. Given the context, presumably it was resting on her knees instead of exercising according to Cindy's instructions. In the early morning hours of the next day, Melinda was again chained to the air hockey table and sleeping on the floor with no pillow and no blankets, no comfort whatsoever. Later that day, she was chained to the bedroom dresser and holding books above her head. Cindy critiqued the way Melinda held the books, saying she needed to sit up straight, not tilt her head and hold the books higher. Meanwhile, Rundle was posting pictures online of the chili recipe he was trying to perfect for the next cook-off and posting other images of food he had cooked in the smoker and on the grill. While inside his house on Reed Road, Melinda was literally wasting away. Despite all the stress and struggle she was dealing with, in March, Melinda was named Student of the Month at her online school and placed in honors classes. That month, Rundle went with G to a Pine Box Derby event and took him to see the new Ghostbusters movie, but he left Melinda at home. Video from April showed Rundle and Cindy punishing Melinda by rubbing soap in her eyes. This caused her pain and made it hard for her to see, but they didn't take her to the doctor or provide any medical attention. On May 1st, the school captured the last video of Melinda conscious and able to participate in class. Over the next several days, her body began to shut down. According to the timeline created by the district attorney's office, Melinda lost consciousness at around 12:52 on the morning of May 4th. Rundle and Cindy argued about what they should do, whether Melinda was faking it or not, and how to wake her up. Rundle decided to put her in his Ford F-150, and he drove her back and forth between the campground he frequented and the family home on Reed Road. Neither Cindy nor Rundle called the doctor or got her any medical help. Hours later, after 4 p.m. that day, They searched the internet for ways to wake someone up and decided to try to find smelling salts, but they were unable to find any in local stores. According to his daughters, Cindy told Rundle to drive Melinda to the emergency room, but he wanted to call 911 first. Finally, 18 hours later at 7:27 p.m., he called 911 and first responders were sent to their home. Paramedics soon arrived along with Chester County Detective Ben Martin. When they arrived, Rundle told paramedics that Melinda had been riding her bike in the middle of the night and had crashed into a tree. Cindy told them that Melinda had a small lump on her forehead, a bruise on her chin, and a small cut on her nose. She was taken to the Paoli Hospital's trauma unit. The couple's description of the events didn't make much sense to paramedics, officers, or hospital staff. Paramedics soon realized there wasn't much they could do. She was covered in bruises and other injuries. She was severely underweight, and she was very, very cold. Determined to show her love and human kindness, one of the medics took off his own sweatshirt and wrapped it around her. Staff at the trauma unit noted far more injuries than the few minor ones Cindy had listed. Melinda had multiple broken bones, bruises all over her body, and she was suffering from severe emaciation and organ damage. Doctors took her into surgery to repair the worst of her wounds, but during the surgery, she died from her extensive injuries. Melinda Hoagland was pronounced dead at 9:58 p.m. Once Melinda was taken to the hospital, her Android cell phone was taken as evidence, and the next day, police took her father's iPhone too. Cindy's cell phone was seized the day after. Police got a warrant to search the truck Melinda was in and filed for warrants to go through the electronic devices, including the Blink cameras installed in the couple's home. Inside Rendell's truck, investigators found a handcuff key and a pair of Crocs that had blood on them. Once the search warrants were approved, the investigators were able to uncover 450 videos of evidentiary value, along with hundreds of still images and text messages that span the time period of about 2.5 years. According to Detective Martin, over 150 of those videos and images showed Melinda cuffed to furniture, and in over 200 of those videos and images, Melinda was being subjected to forced exercise and physical punishment. In the arrest affidavit, the detective said, "The evidence shows that Melinda was regularly subjected to hours of physical punishment, deprived of sleep, and beaten when she failed to comply with unreasonable demands." Rendell and Cindy were arrested on May 6th and initially held at Chester County Prison on a $1 million bail, but their charges were upgraded once more evidence was collected, and they were no longer eligible for bail. At a press conference on July 25th, Chester County District Attorney Christopher DeBarina-Sarob announced he was going to push for the death penalty. He said, "I can stand here before you and say that we intend to pursue the death penalty in this case." He cited torture as one of the factors that justified such a serious sentence. Because they are facing the death penalty, both Rendell and Cindy were required by law to attend their arraignment on September 12, 2024 and listen as their numerous charges were read aloud in court. All in all, they were arraigned on about 280 counts. The most serious charges included first, second, and third-degree murder, endangering the welfare of a child, kidnapping a minor, false imprisonment, involuntary servitude, aggravated assault, and conspiracy. They both pled not guilty to all charges. As the DA stressed at the beginning of his press conference, both Rendell and Cindy are presumed innocent until proven guilty. As part of his argument for pursuing the death penalty, the DA explained how the autopsy findings supported his understanding of the evidence. The forensic pathologist who conducted the autopsy noted that Melinda weighed only 50 pounds, which was 27 pounds less than she had weighed at her last doctor's appointment, 2 years before when she was only 10 years old. According to the CDC, the average weight for a healthy 12-year-old girl is between 68 to 136 pounds, and she was well below that. The pathologist found almost no body fat on her, because it had all been used up in her struggle to stay alive. The doctor noted that there was no disease or medical cause for her extreme weight loss. Instead, it was caused by starvation and forced exercise. That exercise caused prolonged pain and stress fractures in several of her bones. The pathologist found over 75 bruises, contusions, ulcers, and pressure sores on her skin, along with 6 broken bones. According to the report, there was damage found to virtually every major organ system in her body, including her brain. The official cause of death was starvation and multiple blunt force injuries, and her manner of death was a homicide. Summing up the autopsy findings in conjunction with other evidence gathered, the DA said. Information from the coroner's office and medical experts demonstrate a years-long pattern of extensive torture and abuse. Moreover, text messages and hundreds of videos show that the defendants engaged in a calculated and systemic method of terrorizing, manipulating, and dehumanizing Melinda. We'll get justice for Melinda. As of the date of this recording, their last hearing was held in September of 2024. More will be scheduled in the future, and we will be keeping an eye out for updates to the case. Victims' advocates told Rundle's daughters to expect it to take at least 2 years for the case to make it through the court system. Although the DA is seeking the death penalty, no executions have been carried out in Pennsylvania since 1990. A moratorium on executions was imposed in 2015, but prosecutors are still allowed to pursue the death penalty. The last time prosecutors sought the death penalty was in 2014 against Gary Lee Fellenbaum and Jillian Tate for their part in the torture and beating death of Jillian's 3-year-old son, Scotty McMillan. To avoid the death penalty, Gary and Jillian pled guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison, and she was given 42 to 94 years. Now, Scotty's name might sound familiar to some viewers because we covered his case a couple of months ago. His family members were sad and angry when they heard another child was tortured to death in their small rural community of West Collin Township. At the July 25th press conference, the district attorney made an impassioned speech asking the community at large to learn an important lesson from Melinda's death. He said, "On one hand, when you read what we have chronicled in the affidavit of probable cause, you have to feel like we do. There has to be something that we could have done. We could have done better for Melinda. But I want to say that part of the reason I am here, and this is such a critical press conference to me, is we're dealing with the unimaginable. I think it is important for school districts, law enforcement, CYS across the state and across the country to see what happened here. Because although it doesn't get a ton of press, this does happen on exceedingly rare occasions in different parts of the country. And it is time that we all go back and look at our processes to make sure we are doing everything that we can to help our children, to make sure they're not being subjected to this. But on the other hand, I want to make something perfectly clear. We are here because there is evil in this world. We all like to, I think at times, forget about that simple fact. And sometimes, no matter what everyone does, no matter how much we try, evil harms innocent people, even innocent children. We are here today because of what these defendants did, and for no other real reason. It needs to be a part of our culture. If you see something, you need to say something. You do not need to be a teacher, a doctor, a member of law enforcement. You don't have to be a mandatory reporter to call Childline and report something strange. The law does not allow any government agency to take children out of their parents' home without real meaningful evidence. Without reports, these government agencies across the board have very limited abilities to be able to go in court and do what we need to do. So your reports, even if you don't feel like something happened in the aftermath, can be a data point that adds to an ongoing story. It can be that first dot in the timeline, and it can help a child. He also asked the community to grant the family, especially Melinda's mother, privacy in their time of grief. He said her mother had, and I quote, "no blame in all of this, and was in no position to do what her father should have done." Melinda's funeral was not public, but her sisters held a monsoon for Melinda's celebration of her life on June 23, 2024 at the Upper Mount Bethel Community Park. They had a clown, carnival games, a petting zoo, and a pavilion filled with photos of Melinda. At the event, they released butterflies in the afternoon and waved sparklers in the evening. Her sister Emily explained the intent behind the memorial. She said, "We wanted to create a space where anyone could come together to celebrate the wonderful little girl that she was, to kind of have fun together, share fond memories, and essentially have a place she would like to come as well." The paramedic who cared for Melinda the night she died surprised the sisters by attending the celebration, and he brought a token of remembrance with him. He took pieces of the sweatshirt he was wearing that night, the sweatshirt he wrapped around Melinda to warm her, embroidered them with her initials, and gave the pieces to her family. That night, he vowed to show Melinda love and kindness, and he shared that with her sisters too. After his mother's arrest, Cindy Sunji was placed in protective custody, and will eventually be placed with family or in foster care. Well, tonight, the tragic death of Melinda Hoagland is making national headlines. She is the Chester County girl who died after prosecutors say she was tortured and starved by her father and his girlfriend. Today, students rallied in her memory, and CBS Philadelphia's Cefa Lewis has the story. The disturbing news of Melinda Hoagland's death and the suffering she endured before succumbing to her injuries affected virtually everyone who heard the details. My stomach just turned. It's disgusting. That's the best word I could put it. Heather and Christy are sisters who live in West Cowan Township. Heather's daughter, Michaela, was a classmate of Melinda's before prosecutors say her father took her out of school in the winter. Michaela and her friends also heard the horrible news yesterday. We were just talking about how no child deserves to go through that, and how it was honestly devastating that she had to live through that. So Michaela and her friends thought they'd do something to remember Melinda. The t-shirts, they only started with my friends suggesting that we'd bring in shirts and like markers or pens so people could sign shirts. And the blue idea was from a group chat that one of my other friends was in. Blue because it was Melinda's favorite color. Meanwhile, Christy, who had heard what Michaela and her friends were planning, shared it on Facebook. So I decided to post it online to try to reach more parents within our township. We were just trying to rally children together so that they didn't feel alone or sad. So that's what it started with at first. Michaela, who wasn't a close friend of Melinda's, says the idea was a huge success. I know like almost my whole friend group, but from what I saw, almost everybody was wearing blue. Heather and Christy say it really speaks to the feeling of community here. I think it's amazing how a community can come together, and especially for a child. It seems like people want to come more together for children. I just think it's really sweet how the community is so strong, and we really spread the word and fast. There's only a few hours and hundreds of people were talking about it. In West Cowan Township, Siafa Lewis, CBS News, Philadelphia. The district attorney believed that the state teachers and school districts did everything they could to help Melinda. But the attorney hired by her sisters, Tom Bosworth, did not agree. The DA said, "We've reviewed scores of school records, all kinds of records here in this case, and the evidence shows that teachers, school districts, whether they were cyber school or in-person school, they cared about Melinda. They checked in with her. She was reprogrammed. They did the best they could with the evidence they had. This is not a case where actual abuse was reported and no one did anything." Attorney Bosworth claimed the state and school districts could have done more. He said they had knowledge. They knew the child was in the home with this individual who had a record in black and white. The child was displaying both physical and psychological signs of abuse. Attorney Bosworth also believed that CPS could have helped Melinda if they would have conducted a home visit instead of checking in via phone. He said this was systemic, humiliating CA that professionals who are here to protect kids could and should detect through a home visit. And that's why we have home visits. This should have never happened. There shouldn't even be a discussion about how many missed opportunities there were here. If we go the way we're going with the system in place, there's going to be another Melinda Hoagland. He has filed suit on their behalf against Chester and Monroe counties and the Upper Dublin and Coatesville area school districts. Rundle's family has been devastated by the loss of Melinda and the role they believe he played in her death. His daughter, Emily, says, "It's hard to know how to feel." She said, "Not only, is that a loss of our baby sister, but it's also the loss of our father and processing our father and another individual's actions." Rundle's parents, the grandparents of Melinda and her sisters, are also struggling to make sense of their son's actions. Their pain and confusion is heartbreaking. In response to a relative's post about Melinda, Rundle's mother, Joyce, wrote, "We love her. Why did they take her from us? Our hearts are broken. How did our son change to a monster? He used to be so loving and kind, a very good father. I don't know this man that he is now." She also posted, "I can't sleep. All I do is cry. Why? I need answers. How could anyone do this to our little girl? I feel like I am having a nightmare and I want to wake up. I want Melinda back. My heart is hurting so bad." Rundle's father, Ralph, was similarly heartbroken, posting, "Hurting like I never hurt before. Knowing my own son did this to his own daughter. I want justice for Melinda. She was such a lovable girl. I will always love her and miss her." In addition to the losses they have already suffered, family has to prepare for the possibility that Rundle will be sentenced to death. When asked how they dealt with that, Jamie said, "I believe on the criminal side, he gets what he deserves. We believe in the justice system. If it comes down to the death penalty, then it comes down to the death penalty. That's what everybody decides that he needs. Then maybe he just needs that. But our justice doesn't stop there. We are currently trying to form justice for Melinda because what happened to Melinda is unfortunately happening to so many other children. There's not a space for them to make it stop happening. As other families have done when faced with these kinds of tragedies, Jamie, Emily, Abby, and their loved ones are working to keep Melinda's memory alive by helping other children. Her sisters have started a GoFundMe to raise money to start a non-profit organization called Justice for Melinda. They want to help prevent CA by pushing for Melinda's law, a law they hope to get passed requiring people convicted of CA to register in a database, just like Megan's law helped to create a registry for SA. If Cindy had been required to register in that type of database, they believe CPS would have conducted a more thorough investigation once they realized she was living with Melinda against the conditions of the custody arrangement. Now we've seen so many attempts to try to create a registry in cases we've covered on this channel, and most of them get shot down. It would be wonderful if Melinda's law became a reality. We will be donating to this GoFundMe. The link will be in the pinned comment below. If there's anything you can contribute, it goes a long way. The sisters are also supporting Pennsylvania House Bill 2175, which would establish a permanent position for a child advocate in charge of combating CA in the state. That bill passed the House in July, and as of the date of this recording, was stuck in the Senate. On their GoFundMe page, they vowed the following: Melinda will not be remembered as a statistic, but as the beautiful girl that set in motion a monsoon of change for all of these children. We, Emily Lee, Abby Hoagland, and Jamie Hoagland, are ready to stand up and make change. Melinda will not be a statistic, but the name behind the monsoon of change for every girl and boy who has gone through something no one should ever have to. The three of us, united sisters, are ready to stand in the face of evil for anyone and everyone. The storm has only begun. Case 4. Sarah was a beautiful 10-year-old girl from the town of Woking in the UK. She was born on January 11, 2013 to parents Irfan Sharif and Olga Doman, and was of Polish and Pakistani heritage. Her parents ultimately divorced, and Irfan gained custody of Sarah and her siblings and ended up in a council house in Horsell with Irfan's new wife, Binish Batul, and his brother, Faisal Malik. On August 9, 2023, Irfan phoned emergency services in the UK to let them know that he had killed Sarah because, in his own words, she was naughty. He claimed that it wasn't his intention to kill her, he had just beat her up too much. At the time he placed the call, he and his whole family fled to Islamabad, Pakistan. His wife, Binish Batul, made all of the travel arrangements. The following morning, Sarah's body was recovered by the Surrey police. She had been placed in her bunk bed and hidden beneath a blanket. In addition to admitting to dispatchers that he was indeed the killer, Irfan also left a note behind that read, "Love you, Sarah." Sarah's autopsy told a different story. Irfan may have said he loved his daughter, but when you read the report, I feel it becomes very difficult for Irfan to say he truly loved his daughter. The 10-year-old girl was covered in more than 70 separate injuries, which included human bite marks, scalds on her feet, bruises, a burn on her but that was caused by placing a hot iron onto her skin, a broken hyoid bone, a puncture wound to the head, a traumatic brain injury, 11 spinal fractures, and other numerous injuries to her fingers, shoulder blades, and ribs. She also had injuries that showed evidence that Sarah had been restrained and tortured over time. It would later be revealed that Sarah had a hood placed over her head before being beaten with a metal pole and a cricket bat. There were so many injuries that it was actually impossible for examiners to figure out which of them actually caused her death. Sarah's own father, Irfan Sharif, fully admitted that he was chiefly the one who tied Sarah up, put a hood over her head, and beat her with a metal pole that was broken off of a high chair, as well as a cricket bat. Irfan originally admitted to police that he had done this multiple times as a form of discipline, but he later recanted his statement, changing his story to saying it only happened one time. British High Court Justice John Kavanagh called this fact out during Irfan's sentencing. Now let us be clear here. As much as Irfan would like us to believe that he only did this once in a fit of rage, the evidence shows this clearly is not the case. And even if it was true, this isn't as simple as raising your hand against a child in anger. This is somebody tying somebody up, getting a bag to place over her head, so he didn't have to look at her, and beating her multiple times with a metal pole and a cricket bat. For those in the States that don't know what a cricket bat is, we will put one on screen for you to see. This is not something you accidentally do without thinking. This is a calculated and deliberate act, and Irfan Sharif did this multiple times. It would not shock me if this was the act that was the final straw for Sarah. Again, maybe Irfan in his twisted mind believed that he loved his daughter, but I think we can all agree there was anything but love taking place in this household, especially when you add Sarah's stepmother, Binish Batul, and Sarah's uncle, Faisal Malik, to the mix. Remember the bite marks we mentioned on Sarah's body? There were 6 in total. 5 of these were on her arm, and the sixth was on the inside of her left thigh. Based on the size of these bite marks, there was no question that an adult was the one who was responsible. So the police were determined to find out who among these three was deranged enough to bite a 10-year-old girl as a form of punishment. So, teeth impressions were requested from each of the three perpetrators, as well as from Sarah's older brother Purely to rule him out. Both Irfan Sharif and Faisal Malik submitted impressions, and both were confirmed to not be the ones responsible for the bite marks on Sarah. Binish Batul, however, refused to submit hers. Therefore, without any other suspects, it can be inferred that it was Binish who, for whatever sick reason, thought biting her stepdaughter was an acceptable way to discipline her. British High Court Justice John Kavanagh felt this was more than enough evidence to implicate Binish, and made that very clear during her sentencing. The post-mortem investigation showed that Sarah had 6 bite marks on her body. 5 of them were on her left arm, and 1 was on the inside of her left thigh. The marks were made by an adult. Irfan Sharif, and Faisal Malik, and Sarah's older brother, each provided teeth impressions, and each was excluded from being responsible for the tooth marks. Binish Batul declined to give a tooth impression, and the only possible inference is that it was you who made these bite marks. Though the bite marks were not in themselves fatal injuries, the fact that you were prepared to assault Sarah in this way provides an insight into the extent to which you were complicit in, and comfortable with, the abuse that Sarah was suffering. On September 12, 2023, police raided a home in Jhelum, Punjab, Pakistan, belonging to Irfan's father. There, they were able to locate Irfan's 5 surviving children, who were unharmed, thankfully, and subsequently placed into foster care. On September 13th, all 3 adults were arrested at London's Gatwick Airport after flying back home by way of Sialkot in Dubai. On September 14th, Irfan Sharif, Binish Batul, and Faisal Malik were arrested and charged with murder, along with an additional charge of causing or allowing the death of a child. Now, when we released our first episode on Sarah's case, we included this following clip that led to a lot of discussion in the comments section, basically because Binish kept saying no comment over and over again. We are fully aware that no comment is the equivalent of pleading the fifth here in the United States. What was curious to us, however, is that she couldn't even say that she loved Sarah, her own stepdaughter. Sure, maybe she's just following what her lawyer advised her to do, but I truly have a hard time imagining how saying that you loved and cared about your stepdaughter could be something so incriminating. Maybe we have some legal experts in the comments who could share their thoughts, because I'd certainly love to know. Either way, we'll share that clip with you now, just so you can see what we're referring to. Please, could you introduce yourself? What's your name? So, my name is Binish Batul, and you are about to be interviewed for the offense of murder. What's your understanding of murder? What's your understanding of that offense? Killing someone. Yeah, okay, so it's intentionally killing somebody. Okay, in very simple terms, okay? That's the offense which you've been arrested for, and that's the offense which we're going to speak to you about, alright? What happened to Sarah? No comment. What did you see? No comment. Whose choice was it? How you left Sarah? No comment. You know, Dawn has just said, as you said in the video, you want to come back to the UK, clear your name in the UK courts. Well, here we are. This is the start of the process. So, why would you not speak to us now? No comment. Who did that to Sarah? No comment. Do you love Sarah? No comment. Did you care about her at all? No comment. On December 11th, 2024, both Irfan Sharif and Binish Batul were found guilty on all counts. Faisal Malik was found not guilty on the charge of murder, but was found guilty of causing or allowing the death of a child. After the verdict, the police held the following press conference. Good afternoon, everyone. Much closer, yeah, okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Craig Emerson, Detective Chief Inspector for Surrey Police. I've been the senior investigating officer for this investigation. Today, after a 10-week trial, a jury has found Irfan Sharif and Binish Batul, the father and stepmother of 10-year-old Sarah Sharif, guilty of her murder. Faisal Malik, Sarah's uncle, was found guilty of causing or allowing her death. Sarah was a bright and lively little girl who loved singing and dancing, and on behalf of Surrey Police, I would like to extend my deepest condolences to her mother, Olga, her siblings, and all those who knew and cared for her. Sarah's spirit and bravery and resilience in the face of the suffering that she endured has shone through from the vast inquiries that have been undertaken in this case. Sarah's young life was brought to an end as a result of the brutal abuse and unspeakable violence inflicted on her by Sharif Batul, which Malik did nothing to prevent. This case has shocked and horrified not only those who knew and loved her, but people across the country and around the world. On August 10th, 2023, we received a phone call from Sarah's father in which he told the operator that his daughter had died as a result of his actions. From this day, Surrey police has worked tirelessly to build a case to prove that Sharif, Padawar and Malik all played their part in Sarah's death. During the trial, Sharif took the stand intending to blame Sarah's death entirely on his wife before changing his story to accept some responsibility whilst still denying murder. Padawar and Malik refused to take the stand at all or provide any explanation what happened to Sarah in their police interviews. All three defendants have only ever sought to preserve their own interests throughout this investigation and have shown no remorse for their truly dreadful behavior. Sarah's death has been one of the most difficult and distressing cases that Surrey police has ever dealt with. I would like to thank those who came forward to provide information and those who gave evidence in such harrowing circumstances. I would like to thank the jury for their careful consideration of the evidence which has been presented throughout the trial. The murder of a child is absolutely shocking, but the horrific nature of the abuse Sarah suffered during her short life has made this case particularly disturbing. Today, justice for Sarah has been served and our thoughts remain with Sarah's mother and her siblings at this extremely difficult time. Thank you very much. At the heart of this trial was Sarah Sharif, a happy, outgoing, and lively 10-year-old girl who was cruelly abused and murdered by the two people closest to her. We have all seen Sarah's smile shine out from the photos of her, but everyone involved with this case will always remember the utterly horrendous injuries and brutal treatment she received in the weeks leading up to her death. We cannot begin to imagine the suffering she went through in her own family home. Both defendants denied killing Sarah. However, the appalling truth is that they, along with Faisal Malik, were all living in a small house and were all complicit in what was happening to Sarah. The evidence given by some of the neighbors of the family highlighted their concerns about what was going on behind closed doors. Yet none of the defendants did anything to stop or report the abuse that led to Sarah's tragic death. It has been a painstaking operation by Surrey Police and the Crown Prosecution Service to build this case and be able to prove to the jury that Irfan Sharif and Benash Batul were both responsible for Sarah's murder. By showing they were there in the run-up to Sarah's death, we were able to prove that both of them played their part in killing her. This case was complicated further by the fact that all three defendants fled the country to Pakistan, and our CPS International Unit played a significant role in helping us to prosecute this case successfully. On December 17th, Justice Kavanaugh sentenced Irfan Sharif to a minimum term of 40 years in prison, Benash Batul to 33 years in prison, and Faisal Malik to 16 years. Sarah's mother Olga Doman and her grandmother sat down with the guardian to talk what it was like identifying Sarah's body. They put her in a pajama, covered her with a blanket, but no mother should see such a thing. She had swollen cheeks, she had bruises. Until now, when I close my eyes, I can see what my child looked like. It wasn't Sarah. She was completely changed. She was traumatized. If someone hadn't told me it was Sarah, I wouldn't believe it. There's a lot more to share about the history of this case and Irfan's behavior, but we've done an episode on that, which again, we'll link for you down below. Now we're going to get to the updates in the case that have come out since the three adults were sentenced last month. So according to the BBC, The Guardian and many other news outlets, pretty soon after Irfan and company were jailed, their fellow inmates decided to exact their own form of prison justices as revenge for Sarah. On New Year's Day of 2025 at London's Belmarsh prison, two inmates took it upon themselves to attack Irfan in his cell with a piece of a tuna can. He suffered cuts to his face and received medical treatment at the prison hospital and survived the attack. The killer dad of 10-year-old Sarah Sharif is terrified of returning to his prison cell after he was slashed in the neck and face with a jagged lid of a tin of tuna. Irfan Sharif, who was ambushed by two inmates, fears others could target him in further attacks. 43-year-old Sharif was assaulted on New Year's Day and then treated in the healthcare unit of Belmarsh prison in South London. Justice sources have today told The Sun he may now have to be segregated for his own safety. However, Sharif, who was given a 40-year minimum term for the murder of Sarah, cannot be kept away from other inmates indefinitely. And one source told us Sharif is terrified and now fears other attacks. He's not yet back on the wing and will be in no rush to return. Now, a big question that came up in the comments was if canned goods were actually allowed in prisons, because that seemed to be a bit of a security issue. Some folks even believed it to be fake news because they've never heard of such a thing. Since neither of us have ever been to prison and couldn't tell you if canned goods are allowed, we decided to reach out to our good friend Google for an answer. We actually found a couple of different answers, so it looks like this depends on where you're from. One source indicated that yes, canned goods are typically allowed in U.S. prisons, but there are some restrictions. Canned goods must be commercially packaged, airtight, and hermetically sealed. They must also not require any cooking. Other restrictions indicate that canned goods must be 16 ounces or less and cannot be in glass containers. Beverages must be in cans, pouches, or boxes and are no larger than 32 ounces. Meats must be pre-cooked, cured, smoked, or cold-cut. Seafood must be cooked, cured, or smoked and without shells. The food items in question can be purchased at the prison commissary and, for states that allow it, brought in during a visit. Now, according to the gov.uk website, which is most important in this case since it took place in the UK, inmates are indeed allowed tinned food items that are to be kept at designated places specific by the prison administration. So for those listening outside of the UK, Belmarsh Prison is classified as a Category A jail and is located in southwest London. According to some sources, the prison has been described as Britain's Guantanamo Bay. This is due to the long-term detention of terrorism suspects without charge. It's said to house some of the most dangerous prisoners in the nation, so I don't think it comes as a surprise that some of them might have taken issue with Irfan and what he was there for. Belmarsh, or Hellmarsh as it's known to inmates, is also the home of grinder killer Stephen Port, whom we covered many years ago. We'll be sure to link that case for you as well if you're interested in some of our older episodes. Before we go on making Irfan's attacker a hero, we should probably talk about who he is and exactly what he's in Belmarsh for. Irfan was attacked by 45-year-old Stephen Sansom, who murdered a 38-year-old woman named Sarah Mayhew. He and his co-defendant 49-year-old Gemma Watts then proceeded to dismember the woman with power tools and dispose of her body in various locations around southwest London. Some of her remains were recovered in a park in Croydon by a dog walker, while others were recovered from the River Wandle. It's unclear how Miss Mayhew was killed, but at autopsy it was discovered that she had bruising to her skull, 2 fractures to 2 vertebrae near her voice box, and had her head shaved. Stephen pled guilty to murder as well as perverting the course of justice. He pled not guilty to 3 counts of making indecent images of children. However, this wasn't even the first time Stephen had killed someone. On Christmas Eve of 1998, he stabbed taxi driver Terrence Boyle in the throat. Mr. Boyle, who was a father of 2 children, staggered to a nearby house for help but died on the doorsteps. Stephen was sentenced to a minimum of 20 years in prison and was released in December of 2019 barely, having served his minimum sentence. So although Stephen did what a lot of you would like to do to Irfan, he is still clearly an evil person. But this isn't the only update that's come across our desks. There's actually 2 more we've learned about just this week. Being in the US, it can be difficult to keep up to date with the news going on in the UK, especially if it's an emerging case or didn't make international headlines. Again, we have to thank our friend Katie over in the UK for keeping us abreast of the situation as it unfolds across the pond. On January 20th, the BBC posted an article indicating that the Solicitor General decided to appeal Irfan Sharif's sentence. Now, for those unfamiliar with what that is, a Solicitor General oversees all civil and criminal appeals to ensure quality and consistency, and becomes personally involved in selected cases. There's more to it, but this is the simplest explanation we can give. The current Solicitor General in the UK is Lucy Rigby, who was appointed by Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Now, an appeal might make you initially have cause for concern, and that's understandable, because here in the US this normally means the accused is trying to overturn their sentence. However, that's not what's happening here. You see, Rigby actually found that Irfan's sentence of 40 years to life in prison with the possibility of parole to be too lenient for what he did. I think many are in agreement here. I personally would be quite happy if Irfan Sharif never saw the light of day again. She referred the case to the court, and according to a spokesperson for the Attorney General's office, it is now for the court to decide whether to increase the sentence. Irfan himself is also attempting to appeal a sentence, and a court date has yet to be set for either appeal. In other news, an appeal was won to name Sarah Sharif's family court judges. This was announced on the BBC on January 24th. The family court judges in question are the ones who gave Irfan Sharif full custody of Sarah in October of 2019. This is the same judge who had overseen the family hearings from 2013 to 2015. The judge in question was fully aware of Irfan's 5 prior arrests and his history of violence. The court was also aware at the time of multiple romantic partners further alleging that Irfan had falsely imprisoned them in addition to his violent behavior. According to the news source, Mr. Justice Williams ruled in December that the media could not name the judges involved in the historical family court cases related to the 10-year-old, as well as social workers and guardians, due to a real risk of harm from a virtual lynch mob. This might sound strange as judges aren't normally provided anonymity in any of the cases we've covered, but according to the BBC, the judges had concerns given the often inflammatory nature of public and media commentary. However, the BBC and other news outlets weren't satisfied with that, nor should they have been. They managed to appeal that decision in the interest of transparency. As of the 24th, the Court of Appeals ruled that the unnamed judges must be revealed within 7 days. It's been noted that 2 of the 3 judges have conveniently retired in this time. According to Sir Geoffrey Voss, who is the master of the rolls in England and Wales, in the circumstances of this case, the judge had no jurisdiction to anonymize the historic judges either on December 9, 2024 or thereafter. He was wrong to do so. We're going to keep an eye out for updates as they become available. I don't think this is a if they become available situation, because look how many updates have come out in just 1 month. Now here in the States it's rare for a case in the UK to be so easily accessible. We've both had people who aren't interested in true crime bring up Sarah's story with us. So with this being such a high-profile story, it's very unlikely that it will fade into obscurity like so many murders we've covered. At the very least we'll know in about a week the names of the judges involved, and we'll probably post some sort of update when that information is brought to light. We don't normally do update episodes like this, but we made an exception because of the number of requests we received to make one. So let us know if this is something you'd like to see more of going forward. But until then, we love you and stay safe out there. Hey everyone, we don't normally post an update after the fact, but as of today, January 31st, 2025, the judges involved in the Sharif family court proceedings have been named, and they are Judges Alison Rayside, Peter Nathan, and Sally Williams. Now Peter Nathan and Sally Williams have since retired, but Alison Rayside, who dealt with the majority of the hearings relating to Sarah, including allowing both Sarah and her siblings to remain in their parents' care, remains an active judge. Case 5. Timothy Richard McLean Jr. was born on October 3, 1985 in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada to parents Carol DeDeal and Tim McLean Sr. He grew up in Winnipeg and Ely alongside 6 siblings and an enormous extended family. Tim also had a precious baby niece, Isla Lily, who he doted on. At the time of his death, he had a son on the way with his former girlfriend, Colleen Yastro, whom he had known since the 1st grade. Tim stood at about 5'5" with beautiful dark brown hair and emerald green eyes. His family said he filled their lives with joy and light. Tim was very active and full of energy. He loved soccer, football, motorbikes, and just about anything that could get him into dirt or trouble. Tim also had a mischievous side to him and loved pulling pranks. According to his younger brother, Kendall, Tim was extremely charismatic and often demanded the attention of a room with his presence and strong magnetic personality. He also had a passion for traveling and preferred to let the wind blow him around to new people and places instead, never knowing what his next meal was or where it would be. Kendall feels his brother was drawn to joining the carnival because it too was nomadic, wild, and loud with a constant cycle of new faces passing by. He was very much the living embodiment of it. Tim toured various Western Canadian provinces as a carnival worker for the North American Midway Entertainment and made many friends and memories along the way. Vincent Wei Guang Li, born April 30, 1968, was a Chinese immigrant and undiagnosed schizophrenic. He moved from Beijing, China to Winnipeg, Manitoba in 2001 with his wife Anna, initially working as a custodian for the Grant Memorial Baptist Church. He left the job just 6 months later to become a forklift operator. According to Anna, her husband had a strange habit of taking random buses with no apparent destination. Although Vince Lee was never diagnosed with any mental illness before the murder, he had started hearing voices he claimed from God as early as 2004. These voices would tell him he was the second coming of Jesus Christ and must save humanity from a space alien attack. It has been alleged that Vince Lee once spent 4 days under psychiatric evaluation, but was released without ever being diagnosed with anything. Vince Lee became a Canadian citizen in 2005. A year later, he separated from his wife and moved to Edmonton, Alberta, where he lived in a basement and worked for a newspaper delivery company. In 2007, he worked as a janitor, then a mechanic, and then as a Walmart cashier. It has been theorized that the reason Vince went through so many jobs is he would have violent outbursts and would subsequently get fired because of them. There is some evidence for this theory, as staff who worked with him at Walmart said he was let go over a disagreement with another employee. In July of 2008, he returned to work in a newspaper delivery, and on the morning of July 28th, he delivered his last round of newspapers. At midnight that same day, he boarded a Greyhound bus to Winnipeg, Manitoba, but got off the next day in Erickson with 3 pieces of luggage. He was seen spending a long time in the M&M grocery store, and according to one passerby, he spent the night sleeping on a bench. Vince Lee was likely carrying the murder weapon at this point, which he says he bought at Canadian Tire to protect himself from the aliens. On the morning of July 30th, he sold his brand new laptop to a teenage boy for a measly $60 Canadian. He spent almost the whole afternoon loitering in an alleyway behind the grocery store. At around 6 p.m. on July 30th, 2008, Tim McLean, Vince Lee, and 35 other passengers all boarded Greyhound bus number 1170, which was heading from Edmonton, Alberta to Winnipeg, Manitoba via the Yellowhead Highway through Saskatchewan. Vince originally sat at the front of the bus, away from Tim, but after a rest stop, he moved to an empty seat at the back of the bus, right beside Tim, who was seated by the window. This change in seating is believed to have been deliberate by Tim's friends and family. Tim kept himself the whole journey, never saying a word to the man seated beside him. He had been traveling with the carnival for a long time and sent texts to his friends and family members throughout the journey, saying how he was looking forward to finally reuniting with them back home in Winnipeg. However, Tim would never make it home alive. At approximately 9 p.m., the bus was driving down the desolate Trans-Canada Highway, roughly 10 kilometers from Portage-la Prairie, with the movie Zorro playing on the bus TV screen. A horrific and unexpected attack quickly unfolded. Without any warning, Vince stood up, took out a large buck knife, and began repeatedly stabbing Tim in the throat and chest. Tim had just been sleeping in the corner with his headphones in, and had done absolutely nothing to provoke such a violent, gruesome attack. Upon being stabbed, Tim woke up screaming in terror. Witnesses have been quoted as saying that Tim's screams would haunt them for the rest of their lives. While Tim did try to run away, Vince Lee, who was over 6 feet tall and a lot stronger, pinned Tim in the corner against his seat in the bathroom door, stabbing him in the throat and chest over and over again. Tim was stabbed an estimated 50 to 60 times, and we could only hope that he passed on quickly after the first few blows. As soon as the stabbing started, the bus driver immediately stopped the bus and ushered all of the passengers out. One witness, an unnamed man, was the first other passenger to see the attack. He was sitting in the row in front of Tim and Vince Lee, and turned around when he heard the screaming. At first thinking it was just a fist fight, but soon noticed the knife and the blood gushing out of Tim's body. While he wanted to intervene and try to save Tim, his seatmate took off running, and he didn't think he could tackle Vince Lee by himself, especially with him armed. Passengers screamed and trampled over one another, desperately trying to get off the bus as fast as possible. It was absolute chaos. The bus had basically stopped in the middle of nowhere, so there wasn't anywhere for anyone to run to. All the passengers could do was stand on the side of the road, hoping the killer would not get off the bus and continue his rampage. Police had been called at this point, and they would arrive at the scene roughly 15 minutes later. Thinking Tim might still be alive, Chris Alguier, who was a passing trucker who had stopped, as well as the unnamed witness from earlier and the bus driver, ran back to the door to try to help, but all they saw was Vince Lee cutting Tim's head off. Upon seeing the 3 men, Vince charged at them, trying to attack again. The bus driver quickly slammed the door shut, trapping Vince Lee inside the bus, but leaving his arms sticking outside. The bloody knife in his hand, Vince swiped at the witness, who was forcing the door shut as Lee used his other hand to try to pry it open. The 3 men all ran to the front of the bus at this point, but Vince ended up never getting off the bus. Instead, he walked to the front to greet the crowd of passengers, many of whom were children. Vince then proceeded to hold up Tim's severed head and wave it at them before dropping the head on the floor as if it was no big deal. Passengers responded by crying, screaming, and some even vomited. Witnesses described the killer as totally calm and showing no emotions whatsoever. It was like he was a robot. Vince Lee himself would later say that he felt really scared while carrying out the murder. Fearing for everyone's safety, the The trucker got some weapons from his trunk and threatened Vince to stay put and not leave the bus. Vince tried to get the bus working, but thankfully it had been disabled by the driver. I was just reading a book. All of a sudden, I heard a guy screaming. I turned around, and the guy sitting right next beside me was standing up and stabbing another guy with a big Rambo knife, pretty much. It was a big survival knife like this, in the throat, repeatedly. I told everybody to get off the bus. Everybody started to get off the bus. The guy still kept stabbing him. Everybody got off the bus, me and a trucker that had stopped, and the Greyhound driver ran up to the door to maybe see if the guy was still alive, or we could help, or something like that. When we all got up, we seen that the guy was cutting off the guy's head. He was cutting off the guy's head there, and he saw us. He came back to the front of the bus, told the driver to shut the door. He pressed the button, and the door shut, but it didn't shut in time. The guy was able to get his knife out and take a swipe at us, so we backed off the door. I ran around the back side of the bus. The bus driver took off, and then we both returned to the front to see what had happened. He hadn't gotten off the bus. The door was still open. We shut the bus door that time and shut it. It was at that point that he came, started walking to the front of the bus, and he had the head in his hand. He just looked at us like this and dropped it on the ground, but totally calm. The three of us had weapons from the trucker's truck there, and we just stayed outside while he tried to get out the door, telling them, stay put, stay there, don't try to come out. He tried to get the bus working, and the bus driver disabled the bus somehow in the back. I'm not sure how he did it. It was at that point, I think, that the police showed up and got us in the back. Although police officers had arrived at the scene, and Tim was already dead and decapitated, Vince Lee wasn't finished yet. He took the knife and began violently hacking off pieces of Tim's dead body and eating them. In a radio transmission, one police officer referred to Vince as a badger who was defiling the body at the front of the bus as we speak and hacking off pieces and eating it. A large chunk of Tim's heart was eaten, as well as both eyes. Vince Lee tried to escape the bus several times, but it was locked, so he just went back to Tim's body and hacked at it some more. He mutilated the rest of Tim's body parts, stuffed them in plastic bags, and scattered them throughout the bus. Police ordered him to drop the knife, surrender, and leave the bus. However, Vince wouldn't comply and told the officers he had to stay on the bus forever. After hours of police confrontation, Vince Lee was eventually arrested when he tried to flee the scene by breaking one of the bus windows. As they were putting him in handcuffs, he just kept apologizing and begging for the officers to kill him, all while blood was smeared all over his face. Officers also discovered Tim's tongue, nose, and ear inside Vince's pocket. Many theorized this served as some kind of sick souvenir of the killing. Vince Lee was taken into police custody and then transferred to the Winnipeg Remand Center, a correctional facility where inmates await trial. After the arrest, Tim McLean's mutilated body lay at the crime scene for several hours before being taken for forensic examination and autopsy at the Chief Medical Examiner's office in Winnipeg. The autopsy report has never been released into the public domain. As for the witnesses, they were placed at the Royal Oak Inn in Brandon, Manitoba for the night. Many would be in therapy for years and struggle with PTSD as a result of what happened. Chris Alguire, the truck driver who stopped to help, would struggle with rage and alcoholism problems. Another witness, a woman who wishes to remain anonymous, had her baby taken away from her for 18 months because social workers were concerned that her PTSD might affect her ability to care for her daughter. A week after the murder, a candlelight memorial for Tim was held on Sunday evening at the steps of the Manitoba legislature. Tim's older sister, Amanda Corrigan, and younger brother, Kendall DeDeal, spoke to CTV News and referred to their brother as a gentle soul who had never been in a fight and would never hurt anyone else. They expressed their wishes for people to remember him for the way he lived, not for the horrific way he died. The brutal murder of Tim McLean horrified the world and is regarded as one of the worst crimes in Canadian history. And the fate of his killer, Vince Lee, still outrages people to this day. Vince Lee was initially charged with second-degree murder, but after undergoing psychiatric evaluation and being diagnosed with schizophrenia, he was deemed not criminally responsible for his crime. So both the prosecution and defense accepted not guilty by reason of insanity. The murder trial took place on March 5, 2009, and Judge John Scuffield ruled that Vince Lee had acted in self-defense because the voices in his head told him that Tim was an alien who was going to kill him. Instead of jail, Vince Lee was sent to the Selkirk Mental Health Center, a high-security mental health hospital in Manitoba, and not even for a life sentence. Tim's family and friends attended the trial wearing t-shirts with his face on them. They all wept as the details of his gruesome murder were read out in the courtroom. Their pain was only made worse when Crown witness and forensic psychiatrist Dr. Stanley Yarin testified to the courtroom that he felt that the mentally ill Vince Lee was also a victim in this situation. Tim's mother, Carol DeDeal, later shared a heart-wrenching statement with the courtroom during the trial. I quote, "Vince Lee only spoke once during the trial, pleading for someone to please kill me. At least 2 lawsuits arose as a result of the murder. 2 passengers aboard Greyhound Bus 1170 filed a lawsuit against Vince Lee, Greyhound, the RCMP, and the Canadian government asking for $3 million in compensation for, as they put it, witnessing the defendant Lee stabbing Mr. McLean Jr. to death, mutilating his body, and performing acts of cannibalism. Nothing came of the lawsuit, and it was dropped in 2015 when Greyhound said it could not be sued under Manitoba's system of no-fault vehicle insurance. Tim McLean Sr. also filed a lawsuit on behalf of 13 family members against Vince Lee, Greyhound, and the Attorney General of Canada for $150,000, saying they had to put in proper safety measures that could have prevented the death of his son. The lawsuit is currently in limbo. He also stated that Greyhound never apologized or offered any condolences for his son's murder. In 2015, after 7 years of therapy and medication, doctors believed that Vince Lee presented little risk to the public, and he was granted unsupervised day passes to Winnipeg, provided he took his medication and kept a working cell phone with him at all times. He later was allowed to move into a group home in Winnipeg, and was eventually granted an absolute discharge in 2017. This meant he was free to reintegrate into society without any supervision or monitoring. Vince Lee now lives under a publicly known new name, Will Baker. This is very well known. He still resides in Manitoba. Carol DeDeal told CBC News she was horrified and sickened that her son's killer is free to walk the streets of Winnipeg, and expressed doubt over whether he will keep taking his medication. We all know what happens when he doesn't take his meds, but the fact that the decision is left to him, that ought to terrify everybody. I don't know why it doesn't. I don't know why everyone isn't up in arms. Around 50 people rallied at the Manitoba legislature to protest Vince Lee's freedom. The rally was called Justice for Tim McLean, and had been organized by a friend of Tim's, Jenny Clark. One protester and family friend of the McLean family, Brenda Hookman, expressed her anger and frustration with the Canadian justice and health systems, saying there is no way to guarantee Vince Lee won't go off of his medication, and that she wants to see him get the proper help he needs at a psych ward, where he is going to be monitored all the time. Matt Logan, a former RCMP officer and forensic psychologist, also expressed concerns that Vince Lee will attack again, saying the absolute discharge is not in the public's interest, and that society needs to improve the way it bridges criminal justice and mental health. However, not all reactions to Vince Lee's release were negative. Mental health advocate and CEO of the Schizophrenia Society of Canada, Chris Somerville, has been a longtime supporter of Vince Lee, whom he met with almost every month in Selkirk Hospital. Somerville expressed his happiness about releasing Vince Lee back into society, telling CBC News that Vince feels great remorse and great shame over what he has done, and that he hopes nothing negative will come to Vince as a result of his release. Mr. Somerville also released a 45-minute interview with Vince Lee, which he says is an attempt to add a human touch to a horrible tragedy. He believes that both Vince Lee and Tim McLean are victims of untreated, uncontrolled psychosis. In the interview, Vince stated, "I understand people are scared because of my behavior on the Greyhound bus. I am not a risk to anybody. I don't hear voices. I would call my doctor if I heard voices again. Yes, I understand their fear." He also says he wants to apologize to Tim's mom, Carol DeDeal. "I am really sorry for what I did. If I could talk to her directly, I would do anything for their family. I would ask forgiveness, but I know it would be hard to accept." Tim's family has not publicly commented on this interview, and we assume they have no intentions of ever meeting with Vince Lee or forgiving him. Now, many people feel that the fact that Vince Lee could stab, behead, and cannibalize Tim McLean and walk away a free man after only 7 years is a huge injustice. Many people believe someone capable of such a horrific crime can never be trusted again, and that Vince Lee therefore should have been locked away for life. For Tim's family, releasing their loved one's killer was the same as letting someone get away with murder, and they have been campaigning for Tim's law ever since the trial in 2009. Now, this law would ensure Vince Lee and others like him would never walk the streets again, regardless of how likely they were to reoffend. However, this petition was closed in 2014 because only 1,200 people had signed it. The Deal Foundation for Life, which was a fundraiser created to fund the fight to change Canadian, not criminally responsible laws, was also shut down in 2014. While the fundraiser and petition are no longer operating, a memorial in honor of Tim still remains right beside the Trans-Canada Highway west of Winnipeg, where Greyhound bus number 1170 stopped on July 30th, 2008. The words Timothy Richard McLean, "We love you," are engraved into a beautiful white cross, which is surrounded by flowers and one of Tim's shirts. Tim McLean's funeral took place on the Saturday evening of August 8th, 2008. Members of the Christian fundamentalist hate group Westboro Baptist Church, known for picketing funerals, boasted about their plans to protest Tim's funeral for whatever random reason that they never really explained. An alert was sent to Canada's Border Patrol to deny entry to anyone carrying signs and pamphlets. Most of the group was turned away at the Niagara Falls border. However, a small number did actually make it to Manitoba. Tim McLean Sr. responded to the threats in a telephone interview, saying that the days since learning of his son's death have been a blur, and the family hasn't had a chance to even mourn. He also hoped that however the funeral goes down, it's done with respect to Tim, and that we are allowed to lay him to rest. A counter-protest from people in the Manitoba community was planned to prevent the funeral from being disrupted. Hundreds of people showed up to form a human wall around the church to keep out the hate group, but fortunately nobody from the Westboro Baptist Church ever showed up. On August 9th, 2008, Tim McLean was laid to rest at Chapel Lawn Memorial Gardens in Winnipeg. Over 600 people attended his funeral. Tim's uncle Alex McLean read a heartfelt statement in which he described his nephew as friendly, kind, sweet, and caring. On December 21st, 2008, 5 months after Tim was murdered, Colleen Yestro gave birth to his son. Colleen had known Tim since the first grade and had a brief romantic relationship with him in 2008 after she had fallen out with her husband, which led to her becoming pregnant. The family have never shared the child's name and tried to keep him out of the media spotlight. Colleen originally gave up the boy to his step-grandmother, but custody was eventually handed to his paternal grandmother, Carol. In early January 2016, the McLean family returned to the courthouse once again, this time for a custody battle. Colleen, who only had rights to see her son for 4 hours every Saturday, wanted full custody of the boy. Tension between the two families was already bad, but it had reached a breaking point when someone in the McLean family told the young boy about the terrible fate of his father, something Colleen had specifically asked them never to do, telling the court all he knew was that his dad was in heaven. A counselor assessed the interactions between Colleen and her son and told the court she was unfit to be awarded custody of her son. Carol ended up being granted full custody of her grandson, whom she described as a gift from God sent by my son to give me a reason to get up every day and to take care of. And I'm doing that to the best of my ability. She also says the boy has his father's eyes and sense of humor. Tim McLean Sr., who has been divorced from Carol since before Tim's murder, hasn't seen his grandson for years because of ongoing disagreements with his ex-wife, which he says has worsened the pain of losing his son. In 2019, Colleen shared a photo on Facebook of Tim's son visiting his father's grave, writing, "Tim, our son, and I think of you every day." The headstone is rugged and pays homage to Tim's love of the outdoors. The gold inscription in the center reads, "McLean, October 1985, July 2008. Forever, Joker Wilds." Carol Dideli frequently visits her son's grave. In an interview with CBC, she sat at a bench beside the grave and recalls the day of Tim's murder. "When this very first happened, for weeks and weeks, I was just mad. It was so maddening to me that the whole world didn't just stop. Mine did. Nothing changed for everybody else. The traffic still went. Sun still shone. It was so maddening to me that the whole world didn't just stop. Mine did. It stopped, and it took a long time to really want to get up every day." As for Tim McLean Sr., he told the CBC, "It's still difficult to get up some mornings. We're trying to move on, but it's very hard, still very hard. I don't think we'll ever be over it." Tim Sr. remembers his beloved son every day, and even has a tattoo of his face inked over his heart. Tim McLean is deeply and eternally missed by all of his family and friends.